All households need to separate mixed recycling, glass recycling, food and garden organics, and general rubbish. This will help reduce the amount of waste we send to landfill and improve the quality of recyclables in Victoria. Glass bottles and jars now go in your new glass recycling bin. Lids must be firmly attached. Loose lids go in your general rubbish bin. Steel tins, aluminium cans and foil, paper and cardboard, and plastic bottles and containers go in your mixed recycling bin. Food scraps and garden clippings go in your food and garden organics bin. You can use paper towels to wrap your food waste. Put your glass bottles and jars, food scraps and mixed recycling in the bin loose, not in bags. Plastic bags and other items that can't be reused or recycled go in your general rubbish bin. This includes kitty litter, animal droppings, old textiles and nappies. General rubbish should be bagged or wrapped. Update your recycling knowledge today. Learn what goes in each bin by visiting merri-bek.vic.gov.au/recycling-guide.
Hi, I'm Adam Pulford, Mayor at Merri-bek City Council, and today I'm at the Fawkner Leisure Centre. In April last year, we closed the doors here to make way for the first stage of a huge $36.8 million redevelopment. We listened to the community and we're upgrading the centre to make it modern and more accessible and sustainable. So come, let's check it out. I'm here in the shell of the new 50-metre outdoor pool. The pool will have 8 lanes and can be split into 2 with a unique float-up divider. It'll be the perfect spot to get your swim in or cool down when we reopen next summer. Our interactive water play area and beach entry pool is also taking shape. This is completely new to Fawkner Leisure Centre, and featuring a walk-in entry, this accessible and user-friendly space will surely become a family favourite. Now to the new gym and group fitness spaces. As you can see, construction is underway, ready to house the new 375 square metre gym floor, which is 100 square metres bigger than before, as well as 2 dedicated group fitness spaces. This is going to be a state-of-the-art facility designed to get more people in our community to be more active more often. With the centre set to reopen in time for next summer, we're excited to keep sharing with you updates as everything takes shape. So make sure you're following along as we bring the new Fawkner Leisure Centre to life.
Why did we decide to go all electric? The primary motivation was obviously to reduce our carbon footprint as a family, especially with a young son, 8-year-old, who's attending primary school and learning all about climate change and how we can do our bit in reducing the impact. Since purchasing this house, we've installed solar panels, and we've also converted all our appliances cooktop into induction cooktop. Removing the gas cooktop, we've installed the split systems and also the hot water heat pump. At the moment, we export most of our electricity that we produce on a sunny day, which is not a bad thing because we do get paid for that exporting the electricity. What I would recommend others thinking of going on this journey of making their home all electric is to do it. But you can take it one step at a time, there's no rush, and there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of government rebates that you can access as well. There's our Merri-bek City Council website, there's Renew, there's also My Efficient Electric Home Facebook page where you can consult and talk to people that are on this journey.
The compost that we receive from Merri-bek Council that's made from the waste from our green bins, the food and organics waste, is a fantastic resource. A lot of carbon, a lot of organic matter that goes to building up the soil here, combined with the compost that we make ourselves. You know, a really brilliant resource for the garden, and it produces fantastic crops, as you can see behind me.
Well, obviously it's really important to compost food. If it's just going into the normal bin, then it's creating all these really bad greenhouse gases and contributing to climate change. But the benefit for community gardens is that we can't generate as much compost on our own, so we need the addition of council compost to help us grow vegetables and renew the soil so we get the best productivity from the garden.
Sometimes when we get the compost, there's contaminants in it, like plastics, biodegradable bags. Some of them are not quite suitable for the process that the compost goes through. We have to then sort through the compost and pull them out, otherwise they're going to contaminate all our vegetables and the earth that we're trying to re-nourish with the compost.
Messages go around on Facebook saying, hey, there's zucchini or cucumbers in the basket at Pentridge, and they're gone in, you know, half an hour later. So we just like to share it with the community, because that's what it's about.
Hi, I'm Adam Pulford and I'm your newly elected Mayor at Merri-bek City Council. I was originally born in the Northern Territory, but since then I've made my home here in Merri-bek. I love our progressive, creative and diverse community. There's so many great places to visit. There's always something new to learn, something new to see, or something to do. In 2018, our council declared a climate emergency. The reality is that the climate crisis demands we reshape our cities to deal with the impacts of rising heat and more extreme weather events like flooding. But there's also opportunity. Imagine if we use this chance to make our streets greener, cooler and more livable, and safe for everyone to get around in, no matter if you're walking, riding or driving. There's a lot of work for us to do together, and I'm really excited about the next 12 months. So please get in touch with your ideas, and I look forward to meeting you out in our community. We got it? Good.
I'm Penny and I am very passionate about inclusion. I'm also a mum of two beautiful girls, and my connection to disability is that I have retinitis pigmentosa, which is a vision impairment where I have about 7% central vision. So with my disability, because I have such a small amount of central vision, I'm actually not allowed to drive, which does make it a bit more challenging. It means that, you know, to get around it takes a lot of organisation, especially with little kids, so lots of public transport, lots of walking, and you know, for the most part it's fine. It makes us a super organised family. I'd like people to know that, you know, I'm a person too, and that although I have disability and you may not be able to notice when you first meet me, there are some challenges that I do face, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to be involved just like everybody else in the community. You know, my disability doesn't make me who I am. I am me and I have a disability as well. I love playing sport. I live to play sport. Sport's always been a big part of my life, and I was diagnosed at the age of 16. You know, despite having that diagnosis at 16, you know, it didn't change my love of sport. And I was really lucky in that I've always had such supportive community around me that it hasn't been too much trouble to make adaptations for me to play. So some of the things...
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name's Councillor Adam Pulford and I'm the Mayor of Merri-bek City Council and the chairperson of tonight's council meeting. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's council meeting. We're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. We wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of these lands and waterways, and would also like to pay our respects to their elders past and present, as well as to all members of First Nations communities who significantly contribute to the life of our city. This meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Attendees are advised they will be recorded during the meeting. A reminder that as councillors, we will act in accordance with the Councillor Code of Conduct, which will support the principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. In the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. For members of the gallery and councillors attending in person, please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. I'd like to introduce the other councillors in attendance tonight. We have Councillor Angelica Panopoulos,
Good evening.
Councillor Helen Davidson,
Good evening, everyone.
Councillor Oscar Yildiz,
Good evening.
Councillor Mark Riley,
Hello.
Councillor Monica Hart,
Hello, everyone.
and Councillor Sue Bolton.
Hi, everybody.
Online, we have Councillor Helen Pavlidis,
Good evening.
and we also have Councillor Lambros Tapanos and Councillor Anna-Olivia Carly-Hannon approved to attend online, who aren't currently with us. I'd also like to introduce our Chief Executive Officer, Kathy Henderson, and we have members of our executive team and members of our governance team here to make sure the meeting runs smoothly. Item number 1 is apologies. We've received an apology from Councillor James Conlon for this evening. Are there any other apologies from councillors that councillors are aware of? Nope. Moving on to leave of absence. No, just the leaves of absence, yeah. Councillors, is there we have no requests for leaves of absence, so we'll move on to disclosures of conflicts of interest. Yes, the CEO.
Mayor, I just want to disclose a conflict of interest in item 12.1, a material conflict of interest, and I'll leave the room for that. It's because it concerns CEO employment matters.
Thank you to the CEO. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest that people would like to disclose? We'll move on to the confirmation of minutes from the previous meeting. Councillors, could I please have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held 10th of April 2024? Councillor Pavlidis. To move?
Sorry, it's not a confirmation of minutes. I just want a question of clarification because the minutes do state that I raised the issue of the social media process. The response was also, so part of that was that I wanted a response back at this meeting, and the outcome was that it would be provided to me and to the public, but I've still yet to receive it. This is last month. So can I get a status on that, please?
Okay. I might refer you to yeah. We might just take that on notice, Helen, because we're still going through the Councillor Pavlidis, as we're still going through the other items of the agenda, like the initial items of the agenda. But you can raise that perhaps in the governance report agenda item. Confirmations of the minutes from the April meeting. Does anyone wish to move the minutes? Councillor Riley, Councillor Bolton to second. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? I declare that carried. We'll now move on to acknowledgements.
Can I have a division, please? Can I have that recorded as an abstention?
Sure. Okay, so all those in favour of confirming the minutes? So we've got Councillor Bolton, Councillor Hart, Councillor Riley, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Yildiz, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Panopoulos. All those against? There are no councillors against. And any abstentions? Councillor Pavlidis. I declare that carried. So we're moving on to acknowledgements and other matters. Provision of up to 10 minutes is provided for councillors to acknowledge and recognise achievements of local individuals and organisations and raise matters considered important to council that are not already listed in the meeting agenda. Councillors, does anyone have an acknowledgement or other matter they'd like to raise? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to raise just two events that I've participated in recently. I'd just also like to say, look, I have been absent for a period of this year on carers leave. It was palliative carers leave, and just thank council for their flexibility in allowing some attendance at meetings where I could, but that wasn't overly sustainable over the longer term. And just apologies. I think people didn't know. There was a message just put on my email page, particularly to Northwest people, that I haven't been available. But one of the events that I did attend, and I just wanted to recognise it, was last year in the budget process, we funded a picnic shelter on ATC Cook Reserve. There was a lot of work between the community and the council to make that picnic shelter come to fruition. It's quite a large shelter for the elders, for the seniors of the Nepalese community. And council threw it open to the community to actually sort of open the shelter, which was on March 22nd. And it was a wonderful event. It was a number of hours of celebration. And it's a wonderful achievement for the community who really lobbied council. We didn't have it included in the budget that came, I think, out for consultation last year. And so it was a successful lobbying of the community that council were able to fund that project. And I guess I mention that too because I think it's great that there are those opportunities for people to comment on the budget and to still lobby councillors and for us to be able to hear what people in communities are wanting. So I think that to me is a wonderful example of that, and thanks very much to that community. The second event that I wanted to comment that I'd been at was last week, and the Accessible Transport Campaign for Sydney Road had a petition tabled in Parliament. It was tabled by Samantha Ratnam from the Greens, and it was in the upper house. Members of the Greens, Labor and Liberal all contributed to that debate in the acceptance of that petition, so that was very pleasing to see. And I want to just comment on the strength of Sam Ratman's speech that day, and one of the things that she particularly stressed was this was non-party political. This is an issue that needs to be addressed by all parties, not just for Sydney Road, accessible tram stops, but across the board. So I was very pleased to be able to attend that with Christian Astorian, who started the petition. And the work of council was certainly acknowledged in supporting the Accessible Transport Campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Do any other councillors have an acknowledgement? Or Councillor Bolton?
Yes, I left the leaflets behind, but I believe there's an advertisement on the council website. But for anyone who's interested and available and has been following this issue, there is an Aboriginal site in Glenroy on Hilton Street. It's the Ballot Merri-bek site of an Aboriginal school, which was closed down a little over 10 years ago, and there's been a campaign to win the site back for First Nations Community Hub. Anyway, there's going to be an open day as part of, I think it's Reconciliation Week, on 26th of May, which is Sunday, I believe, and about midday actually, because I haven't got the leaflets in front of me. But anyone who's interested, you can look up the council website, look up Ballot Merri-bek, and you can get the details, because it'll be, is a real coming together of the local community, especially the local community in that area with the First Nations community and beyond. So, yeah, I encourage people.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to acknowledge the input from staff in Merri-bek, but also the Darebin City Council in supporting the Merri-bek Wayi Day a few weeks ago, which is a really important step in celebrating the cultural values of the waterway, the Indigenous Wurundjeri Wurrung connections to that waterway. And this bit of work is also really importantly came out of the attack 5 years ago on the woman further up the creek, up sort of around the Bell Street or Moreland Road area, excuse me, and we listened to the community and decided we should try and address safety issues along the creek, directional, so people and women particularly can get in and out of spaces, in informal and formal spaces, and that's been a really important part of this work. But it also took on other issues like social values on the creek. We know how much it was used during COVID and how important open space is and having clean water. It's also acknowledging and recognising the excellent work of the Merri Creek Management Committee and the Friends of Merri Creek. So just want to thank the officers and everyone involved in that. It was a really excellent day, and hopefully that'll be an annual event and people can come along and find out more about the significance of the creek and the Indigenous connection to it, the Rawoy connection. Also, Councillor Bolton's already mentioned the Bulurt Maroop Day, Bulurt Maroop meaning strong spirit. But I also want to mention that the Treaty Forum is being held here at the Coburg Civic Centre the Thursday night before, which is the 23rd of May, 6 p.m. And if people want to understand and get an insight into how treaty may be processed at a local government level, state and federal level, then please do come along. The First Peoples Assembly will be represented there, and there'll be other speakers from other parts of government. And in closing, just on the violence against women issue, not just on the Merri Creek, but much more broadly, it's been an issue in our community and it's getting a lot of discussion and airing at the moment. The men's group that was formed in 23 called the Courageous Conversations with Men Against Violence Against Women. They're meeting again tomorrow evening. If people are interested, they should get in touch with me, and we'll be working out on next steps to have some impact and change on men and boys' culture and how we can actually really start to turn things around, because there's too much talk, too much hurt and too much death and violence against women, and we need to take more action as men in that. Everybody does, but men particularly need to be doing what they can to challenge the issues for many young men. You might have heard the Yarra Valley School story, which is just an appalling story about two young 11-year-olds who've now been kicked out of school. That's just one story of what we're getting to witness and the treatment of women. And they had a spreadsheet about girls. You know, it's just absolutely horrifying to see that young people are doing this. And the school's doing their best, but we need to do more. And so if people, particularly men who identify as men, want to get involved with me, you can get my details off the website. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I wanted to make just a quick contribution. The state government budget came out yesterday, and we also got confirmation that the Brunswick level crossing removals project will be delayed by a number of years, saying it'll be completed by 2030 now. So as a council, I think we feel, I'm sure other councillors feel a bit disappointed in that delay, given we did an extensive community engagement process at the start of last year, because we were told by state government that their community engagement would happen in 2023. So we wanted to be prepared to make sure we knew what our community thought around the level crossing removals and what they wanted to get out of that project. But that work's been useful in shaping up council's position, advocating to the state government. And what we've said is, while it's disappointing the project's been delayed, we hope that the state government uses the extra time and resources to transform Sydney Road with a safe cycling option and accessible tram stops. This is in light of some of the great work that Councillor Bolton was talking about from Christian Historian and the Sydney Road Accessible Tram Stops campaign, but also because the level crossing removals will shut down the upfield shared path and they'll shut down the upfield rail line, which means that part of our community during the construction period would lose accessible public transport. And a lot of the cyclists that use upfield shared path will be pushed out onto Sydney Road, which can be quite dangerous for them. So we're saying that the state government should use this as a chance to fix Sydney Road, because not many people are happy with Sydney Road as it currently stands, and that'll help solve some of the issues during construction about where do cyclists go and where do people who have accessibility issues or prams who want to catch public transport, giving them an option too. So just thought that'd be update our community on that. I think we've reached the 10 minutes allocated for this, so I'll move on to the next item, but also wanted to acknowledge we've got Councillor Anna-Olivia Carly-Hannon joining us online. Councillor Carly-Hannon, would you like to just test your mic and say hello?
Good evening.
Awesome, great, thank you. So on to number 5, item number 5 on the agenda, which is petitions. We have 3 petitions to consider this evening. The first is 5.1, the petition to stop removal of 6 on-street car spaces on Glenlyon Road in Brunswick. Bree Sharman is here tonight in person to present the petition. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest to disclose? So Bree, if you'd like to introduce, yeah, come in, and make sure there's a green light on the microphone so that you can be heard. Introduce yourself and the petition.
Thank you. My name's Bree Sharman. Thank you for your time this evening. I'd like to submit this petition, and firstly, I'd like to ask you to ask yourselves if you know what the core issues are at the intersection of Glenlyon Road and Ewing Street, and I'd ask you to ask yourselves if you know how the removal of these 6 car parking spaces will actually improve safety. All of my requests to engage on this topic and for information on this project, I didn't receive one response to an email, phone call or voicemail until I submitted this petition, and I received 2 from councillors, but I've still not actually received information on how safety will be improved. And given that the changes are not addressing the core issues of a right-hand turn out of Ewing Street, a bus stop right at the intersection and a road incline, safety will not be improved. And if you are really familiar with this intersection, you would know that. I just wonder if this is a council project that's an optics piece, and does it tick a box to say that council has spent X amount of dollars on safety in Merri-bek, but with no how? And on safety, and you've spoken about it tonight, councillor, you're actually diminishing mine and that of my young daughters, because I'll now be required to walk quite a fair distance from a car park to my home late at night. And we all know the statistics about violence against women. You're also locking people out of people's homes because elderly family and friends will not be able to walk that distance. You're expecting us to walk up to 2.5 kilometres to bring our groceries in on the 3 trips. And there's lots of other stories from other residents within the area within that strip that have young children and elderly family. But I come back to the crux of the argument, and if you don't know how these changes will improve safety at this intersection, then I ask you to stop this work immediately, because the negative effects far outweigh the non-existent safety improvements.
Thank you, Bree. Councillors, is there anyone that'd like to briefly speak to the petition? And then Councillor Riley?
Yep. Thanks, Bree. We've been working on this for a long time with many parents and students, and anyone who looks at the treatment there at the moment, you can see how cars are crashing into it and damaging it all the time. I respectfully don't share your views on safety at this point. It's actually much more important for us to fix the safety for bike riders and pedestrians because of the busyness of that street and the damage that motor vehicles do. So really happy to accept the petition on your behalf and to consider it. But we've been doing this work for quite a few years. I teach down the road at the school, and many of the community that go to the school I go to have been really advocating for improvements on Ewing Street, and this is just another final step in that connection to Mini Street, etc. So I appreciate the impact you're having, but it's good to hear that. Thanks.
So do we have a motion to receive the petition? Councillor Bolton, seconded by Councillor Davidson. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Thank you, Bree. So Council will write an official response to the petition. Thank you. 2 petitions have been received since the agenda was produced. A petition has been received containing 35 signatures requesting Council keep the Harding Street suspension bridge. Is Xander Dean here, or potentially Laura? Xander or Laura, are you? Oh, okay. Sorry, they'll be joining us online. Is that right? Are they in the... Great, okay. So, sorry, Xander and or potentially Laura will be joining us online to present the petition. Xander, hi Xander, can you hear me? Okay, I think we might just... Xander, can you hear me? Yeah, it looks like it might be frozen. Oh wait, Xander, hi. Can you hear me? Xander, if you can hear me, could you try and just say hello and then briefly speak to your petition? It looks like we might be having some technical difficulties, so perhaps we'll move on to the next petition and see if we can sort that out in the meantime, if someone from the comms or governance team can try and check that out. So we'll move on to the other petition that we've received. So a petition has been received containing 26 signatures requesting council remove the mounds at Hoskin Reserve and properly test them. Peter Fisher is here tonight to present the petition. Does any council have a conflict of interest to disclose? No.
Hi.
Hi, Peter. Go ahead.
Good to be here. So we have a petition to Merri-bek Council to remove the large soil mounds parallel to the North Field and to properly test, and we're talking certified NATA asbestos testing, Hoskin Reserve for asbestos or asbestos-containing material, so that park residents and adjacent residents are assured that implementation of the master plan meets all public health obligations and community expectations. Item 7.1 today contains evidence council has not met these obligations or expectations, and I will run through that in detail. Number 1, item 7.1, officer report, legal and risk considerations. No formal project risk assessment has been undertaken, and this is negligent. The report confirms investigation was somewhat limited, and that's a quote. Asbestos and ACM were never tested for, and only limited ground surface visual inspections and borehole samples occurred. Council was repeatedly told in 2021 during the Hoskin Master Plan refresh consultation of the high likelihood of contamination, and it is inexplicable that this information was not identified in the 2022 land contamination audit. Since April 2024, 8 large asbestos-containing mounds have been covered on site, and the officer report identifies a couple of things, including A, that Council's contingency funding for contamination was removed from the Capital Works program after 2020-21, and B, that the limited air monitoring for asbestos on the Southfield only commenced on January 2024, 5 months into excavation, and C, that additional costs have been incurred to raise the level of the south pitch by 30 centimetres, with new soil introduced to the site to limit disturbance of asbestos and asbestos-containing material. Attachment 2 to that report, the Presner Hoskin Reserve Soil Classification April 2023 report quotes that ACM was not identified within the borehole locations, and it is noted that boreholes are not the preferred method for assessing ACM contamination in soil, which results in a
Peter,
degree... I'm going to read it all out.
Well, there's 2 minutes allocated to speak to a petition. You're over the time, so if I just ask you to come to the conclusion. We also have community members asking questions and making statements in the other part of our meeting on this.
Has everyone read this petition?
It's been circulated to everybody today.
Okay. I think it should be on the record, all this information. I would like it to appear in full in the minutes. The fourth point that I would like to make actually picks up on Councillor Riley's earlier point about making women and children safe. These mounds actually do impact the line of sight across the reserve, and adjacent residents also have the ability of people using the reserve to see into their homes. There's a number of issues in this that I haven't covered, and I do think that it would be more appropriate if I had more time.
Sorry, Peter, we do need to continue with the meeting, but...
An extension of time by a minute?
Well, it's been over a minute now, but we'll have other questions and statements on this shortly in the next item. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone.
It was a 300-page report that you asked us to digest in a week.
Sure. Thank you, Peter. Sorry, does any councillor wish to speak to that? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
I just I'd just like to thank Peter and the residents for bringing this to Council's attention. I was unaware of these mounds having suddenly appeared on both sides of Hoskin Reserve until a question was asked at the, which was at the March Council meeting. And so I think it is really important that residents have kept raising this issue ever since, because I see this as quite a big deviation from the master plan.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Yeah, you can pass it.
And I've got an amendment coming up along these lines.
Through the Mayor,
Sorry.
can I just ask for the officer to respond as well to this petition?
I think we'll have questions and statements later, so we might be able to address that, address some of those issues during that time. But thank you, Councillor Davidson. I don't think we normally do have officers respond to petitions. So, councillors, is there? Do we have a motion to accept that petition? Yeah, Councillor Riley to move, Councillor Bolton to second. All those in favour? All those? Hang on. So, yeah. All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, I declare that carried. We'll move on. We'll move back to the previous petition on the Harding Street Bridge. So, Xander, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me, Council?
Yes, great. So,
lovely to hear you.
Thanks for joining us, Xander. You've got 2 minutes to speak to the petition, and we'll just reset the clock and go ahead.
No worries, thank you. As you can see, I'm coming at you live from the Harding Street Suspension Bridge this evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak to this petition. Whilst this petition only had 35 signatures, the previous petition on the same topic had over 350 signatures. We were told that we could not use the same petition, so this one is fairly new. Me and the other locals care about this bridge. The Harding Suspension Bridge is a beautiful pedestrian bridge that was built first in the 1920s and then rebuilt again in the 1980s. It's a very iconic piece of art history here in Coburg. In 2022, locals were told that the bridge had reached the end of its life, despite it only being roughly 40 years old. There's no denying the creek needs more bridges, and the suspension bridge is not exactly accessible for people with mobility issues or bikes. It's a narrow footbridge, but we support another bridge being laid. Council last month released plans of replacing the bridge, but from the photos, the bridge is being built next to the suspension bridge by about 20 metres. So it seems like a small tweak to the plan could have two bridges, one pedestrian historic bridge, and the other a more accessible bike-friendly bridge. Keeping the suspension bridge also ensures that people can still cross this part of the creek during construction of the new bridge. When the project was announced a couple of years ago, Merri-bek advised that there would be no way to cross the creek in the region for another 12 months during that construction. The next place to cross is either 10 minutes walk north to Bell Street or 20 minutes walk south to Moreland Road. Thank you so much for giving me a moment to speak.
Thank you, Xander. Councillors, is there anyone that wishes to speak to this petition? Do we have a motion to receive this petition? Councillor Hart, seconded by Councillor Bolton. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? I declare that carried. Thank you, Xander, for joining us, and I believe we might see you or Laura later for some questions.
Thank you so much.
That's the final of the petitions that we've had submitted this evening. So we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda, questions of council and community statements. The time provided for questions and statements is 30 minutes, and this time can only be extended by another 30 minutes by resolution of council. If we do not have time to answer your question, it will be taken on notice and responded to in writing. Priority will be given to questions and statements that relate to matters listed in the agenda. If time allows, questions about items other than those listed on the agenda will be considered. A maximum of 2 questions or statements in any combination is allowed per person, and questions or statements that relate to a matter listed in the agenda are dealt with first. If you've registered to ask a question, when I invite you, you or your representative must state your name and suburb and then ask your question with preamble or background for up to 3 minutes. If you've registered to make a statement, when I invite you, you or your representative must state your name and suburb and then make your statement without taking longer than 3 minutes. If you've submitted a second question or indicated you have a second statement, It may, at my discretion, be deferred until all other persons who have submitted questions have asked their first question, or it might not be asked if time doesn't permit. A maximum of 3 questions will be heard on any one subject, and we will proceed to the next topic. If time allows, we will return to the previous topic. I will either answer the question on behalf of Council or invite another councillor to answer. Alternatively, I'll ask the Chief Executive Officer to provide a response or refer it to another Council officer. There will be no response or discussion in relation to community statements. As detailed in the governance rules, questions or statements may be disallowed if they're defamatory, indecent, abusive, offensive, irrelevant, trivial, or objectionable in language or substance. If a response to your question is provided at tonight's meeting, there will be no further formal response. However, Council will action any commitments made in answering that question. Council has received a total of 25 questions and statements. 10 of these have been taken on notice. The commencement time for questions of Council and community statements is 7:38 p.m. First up, we have on item 7.1, Hoskin Reserve Master Plan, we have Alicia Lilly, who's here with us in person. Alicia has a question. Lily, sorry.
And I'm afraid that I submitted it and it's slightly longer than 3 minutes.
That's okay.
I apologise.
Yes.
But I am a slow speaker. I'm trying to be fast. Thank you very much, Mayor and councillors and Merri-bek staff. I am Alicia Liley, a disabled resident of Merlinston, the only public park close enough for me to relax, recuperate from my enormous number of stresses, rehabilitate and enjoy its Hoskin Reserve. This council has permitted the Pascoe Vale Soccer Club the allocated times of Monday to Friday 4 to 9 p.m, as well as both Saturday and Sunday 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. This is extremely unfair and completely inequitable allocation of a public space. I'm not just speaking on behalf of the many disabled residents of Merri-bek, but for your many residents who, due to their working hours and or children's commitments, only have the available time for their own relaxation and recuperation when this public park has no accessibility due to PVSC. This is the same council who had spent $6.3 million in 2015, just 10 minutes away at Fawkner CB Smith Reserve. It is exactly this specific council who, in 2021, I'd reminded you of the anticipated increased population of this local community, new residents who will be requiring extra space that's not related to soccer. Plus, I know that thousands of Merri-bek residents have told you about this unequal representation ever since 2020. Are you trying to prove that one of your residents who is over 50% disabled has more common sense and equity concerns for others as compared to some elected to our local government? I do wish for 100% of the councillors to vote again about the allocation rights of Hoskin Reserve, please. This is for the local residents of Merlinston and Merri-bek who pay rates for the renovation of Hoskin Reserve, and for some who do not even live in the ward. However, regardless of my local community's fight for equality, I discover on the front page of The Age on Saturday, April the 6th, with the relevant article on pages 4 and 5, that Hoskin Reserve has asbestos, as you all know. By April 10, last council meeting, 2 further reports were discovered. My friend from Fawkner had discovered and had confirmed by the EPA that there is asbestos at the Fawkner Merri Creek Parklands, Leonard Street. And my friend John Englert told me of asbestos at Shaw Reserve in Pascoe Vale. I am asking the council of this Merri-bek's asbestos' history. How long has the asbestos been in Merri-bek? And where has this contamination originated? I ask for this public awareness for the clarity and transparency of the makeup of this asbestos, and how did the asbestos get into Merri-bek's soil? Why did the council allow further works on top of asbestos, yet you still allowed renovations at Hoskin Reserve, such as the playground, when asbestos has been discovered and reported there 20 years ago? Plus, as Peter explained, the 2021 Hoskin Reserve Refresh Group discussed this actual matter. Again, does all the councillors ignore the concerns of your citizens? In relation to the council's e-news and publication report, stating that this council's maintenance team are in parks once a month and report any potential contamination, then why was it that Merri-bek's residents are those who reported asbestos in at least 2 of these 3 sites? I hope to have some clarity and transparency, please, of the process of this investigation. Please. Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you, Alicia. And I might refer some of your questions onto the Director of City Infrastructure, Anita Kerno, to respond.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Thank you, Alicia, for your...
I'm also half deaf, so I can't...
Can you hear me?
Not really well, but...
Okay, I'll try to speak up a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Responding to the questions in relation to the discoveries of asbestos that you outlined towards the end of your question there. That many of Melbourne's open spaces, including within Merri-bek, are constructed on former landfill sites and tip sites, and it's common for excavation works to reveal contaminated material, including asbestos. Merri-bek has a long industrial history, and it is also common to find asbestos and other contaminated material throughout our industrial areas or former industrial areas as part of redevelopment works. Such asbestos may have come from illegal dumping of construction waste or historic poor demolition practices. In the cases of Hoskin Reserve and the Leonard Street grasslands, the asbestos recently discovered had been buried for some time, likely for decades.
As has the report 20 years ago, it seems.
These sites both had identified asbestos that was non-friable, bound into cement sheeting and the like. When previously buried asbestos, suspected asbestos is exposed, this needs to be treated in accordance with WorkSafe and EPA requirements, of course. In the case of Hoskin Reserve, the asbestos was suspected and then confirmed during excavation for the master plan implementation. Council has responded and has extensively documented in tonight's council reports on this project, and will implement an ongoing monitoring plan to the site once the project is complete. In the case of the Leonard Street grasslands, the asbestos was identified and reported by a passerby, and the EPA and Council's expert contractors have since attended the site and consider it likely that the recent heavy rains have caused erosion, and that has exposed these fragments. Council quickly closed off the area, had testing done to confirm the material, and had a full surface scour undertaken by qualified hygienists and removalists to allow a certificate of clearance for the surface presence of asbestos to be provided. Nonetheless, Council has kept the site fenced off and is developing a monitoring and management plan. We will liaise with the EPA in doing so and implement any necessary remediation and ongoing monitoring regime.
Thank you.
Council's officers do, unfortunately, from time to time, come across suspected dumped asbestos in our parks, on nature strips and in other public places. We have well-established practices for removal of such material by a specialist contractor. Staff have recently been retrained in asbestos identification and reminded of the procedure to follow should they encounter any. This includes staff involved in responding to reports of dumped rubbish, as well as open space maintenance crews who are out in the parks regularly. In the case of Shore Reserve, the EPA identified that the material taken from the site for testing was asbestos. Council had already closed the site, by this time conducted a full review of the site with qualified hygienists, received a clearance certificate and provided this to the EPA, upon which advice EPA promptly endorsed the reopening of the site. No further fragments were identified during this review, and it was generally considered that the small amount found had recently been illegally dumped there. If a member of the public suspects that material they encounter on public land contains asbestos, this can be reported to Council and an appropriate response will follow.
Thank you to the Director of City Infrastructure, and thank you to Alicia.
I still am querying why nothing has happened since 2021. It's just come up in 2024.
I think it's construction actually started later. Yeah, I take your point that people were aware of it. But yeah, thank you for your question.
And I'd like to also, bring your attention about, the allocation of the.
Yes.
Because it's just not equal, and you're meant to be a council of equality.
Thank you, Elisa. I'm going to have to move on to the next question, but thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your time.
So we'll move on to Margaret Mary Cashin, who's got 2 questions in person. Welcome, Margaret Mary.
Hello. I'm Margaret Mary Cashin. I live in Merlinston, and I am a user of Hoskin Reserve. Question 1. On receipt of Prenza's preliminary site inspection report, March 2023, intrusive soil sampling was recommended to be undertaken, which would have allowed actual testing for asbestos and ACM. Why then did Council ignore this professional advice, stating, and I quote, that soil to be excavated was surplus to needs and would be disposed of off-site, end quote. Council instructing Prenza to therefore only classify in situ soil. Question 2, where can I find or obtain the asbestos management plans for the east and north areas of Hoskin Reserve? As the asbestos management plan by Prenza, December 23, as in 2023, attachment 4, only references the south field of Hoskin Reserve, despite asbestos being confirmed on the north and the south of Hoskin Reserve a month earlier in November 2023, attachment 3. And subsequently, asbestos also has been found on the east this year.
Thank you, Margaret Mary. I'll ask Director of City Infrastructure, Anita Kerno, to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Margaret Mary, for your questions. Prenza undertook the borehole samples and did not find any asbestos-containing materials.
That's a visual look, nothing more.
However,
and you already know this.
Anita, could you just speak up a bit? Thanks. Sorry.
However, given that it was an old landfill site, the firm recommended intrusive soil testing to ascertain asbestos-containing materials. Intrusive testing would have involved multiple large holes being dug. While asbestos is under the ground, it poses little or no risk to anyone. When it's dug, it then changes in terms of its being visible and accessible. In lieu of intrusive testing, Council waited until the commencement of works to undertake assessment of the excavated material, because we knew that that would be the best way to manage that risk.
There was no asbestos treated treating tested
And
prior
Nina, did
to
you respond the
November
second question?
2023, some
Thanks, Margaret.
4
Mary. Just-
months after
Thank you, Margaret Mary.
excavations on the north.
Would you like an answer to your second question?
To your second question, which is that Council issued a site-wide asbestos management plan in December 2023. This has been provided at attachment 4.
Thank you, Margaret Mary. We'll now move on to questions on item 7.3, Merri-bek Planning Scheme Amendment 230 MBEC, which is the Brunswick Activity Centre Zone Decision Gateway 1. First up, no, I think you asked that to be considered we accepted it at the last meeting, but we didn't accept it for this meeting. So I'm going to move on to...
She was accepted on the thing that Troy sent around.
On my copy, it says taken on notice, so I don't know what you're talking about. So we'll move on to 7.3, Merri-bek Planning Scheme Amendment C23 MBEC. We have Nicole Den Elsen in person to make a statement.
Three questions on any one topic. It's up to 3 questions on
I understand that, Councillor Bolton. We had 2 questions. There's up to 3, yes. But there's other items on the agenda, and we made sure we made time at last month's meeting to have questions on Hoskin Reserve, even when it was on the agenda. Sorry, Nicole. Yeah, go ahead. We also had the petition.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My name is Nicole Denelson and I live in Brunswick. I have a statement about the Vibrant Brunswick Draft Brunswick Activity Centre Structure Plan. I live on the corner of Colebrook Street and Tinning Street in Brunswick. Colebrook Street is a local road in an Industrial 3 zone, the purpose of which is to act as a buffer between the neighbouring Industrial 1 zone and the adjacent large residential area, which includes hundreds of homes, some dating back to the 1800s. Colebrook Street is in one of several buffering Industrial 3 zones that, contrary to misleading maps in the Vibrant Brunswick document, currently sit outside the Brunswick Activity Centre. These Industrial 3 zones were intentionally excluded from the Activity Centre in a 2012 Council addendum to the structure plan because they were, quote, not expected to undergo the same level of change as areas within the Activity Centre. This is consistent with the Merri-bek Industrial Land Strategy 2015 to 2030, which preserves the core industry areas for industrial employment use. The Vibrant Brunswick document proposes to expand the Brunswick Activity Centre boundary to include Colebrook Street and several other Industrial 3 zones, thus changing their zoning to the new Activity Centre zone, where they would be part of the core employment precincts. This would make these Industrial 3 zones essentially the same as current Industrial 1 zones in the Activity Centre, eroding the role of these Industrial 3 zones to actually protect adjacent residential areas from these Industrial 1 zones, and allowing currently prohibited land uses in these Industrial 3 zones, including large supermarkets, cinema complexes, directly next to people's homes. Further, one of the 4 objectives of these core employment precincts is to encourage the development of live music venues. Vibrant Brunswick talks at length about the Activity Centre being a noise hotspot and the many noise complaints made against music venues by residents. And yet you are now going to encourage live music venues directly next to long-established residential areas with homes dating from the 1800s and 1900s, homes with noise attenuation capabilities characteristic of that era. You might say that development decisions in the Activity Centre must consider residential amenity. However, it is my experience of past council decisions that the interests of business, particularly a prioritised sector such as live music, take precedence, which can only come at the expense of residential amenity. The inclusion of the Industrial 3 zones into the Brunswick Activity Centre will lead to more complaints to council, more residents and council's time and money spent at VCAT, and reduced livability for residents. The Vibrant Brunswick document also says that expanding the Activity Centre to include Industrial 3 zones is consistent with the State Government practice note for the use of Activity Centre zones. However, industrial areas are not once mentioned in this practice note. Activity Centre boundary criteria clearly focus on existing commercial zones and areas with government buildings. I implore Council to reconsider expanding the Brunswick Activity Centre to include Industrial 3 zones like Colebrook Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next up, we have a question from Red Fennessy, who is on, well, two questions. Red Fennessy, who is joining us online. Do we have Red with us? Great. Hi, Red, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Go ahead, Red. You've got 3 minutes to ask your questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you all councillors for your time this evening. I'll keep it brief. I have two queries, obviously on agenda item 7.3. I work for Planning and Property Partners and acting on behalf of a client with land within the area that's affected by this planning scheme amendment. The first question I have is that part of the rationale that informs Council's policy agenda is the existence of vacant and poor quality commercial floor area within activity centres. On what basis can Council conclude that the same inefficiencies in tenanted buildings will not result for larger commercial areas, which will be more expensive to lease and with a smaller pool of potential occupants? My second question is, has Council considered limiting the commercial floor area requirement to main roads or applying discretionary and incentive-based planning scheme provisions to encourage commercial floor area provision? Thank you.
Thank you, Red. I'll refer your questions on to the Acting Director of Place and Environment, Phil Priest.
Thanks for your question, Red. In response to the first question, the draft activity centre zone includes design requirements for the layout and fit out of commercial tenancies. So this is a new introduction into the Merri-bek planning scheme. This is to address the issue of tenancies being an afterthought in new residential development. The design requirements seek to ensure new commercial spaces are fit for a range of different uses and can easily be fitted out or retrofitted. These measures seek to address the need that has been identified for a 50% increase in commercial jobs in the Brunswick Activity Centre over the next 15 years. If this employment floor space is not provided in new development, the opportunity is lost. So this amendment seeks to address this issue over time. In response to your second question, yes, that's correct. In 92% of the proposed mixed-use precincts, the commercial floor area requirement is discretionary rather than mandatory in the proposed amendment before Council. In addition to that, the multi-use precincts are focused along the main commercial spines of Sydney Road and Lygon Street. It's only in 8% of the multi-use precincts is the commercial floor area requirement mandatory. The approach being taken by Council in this work is consistent with Council's industrial land use strategy to only support residential use in the employment priority areas after the minimum amount of commercial floor space is achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Red.
Thanks.
We'll move on to two questions in person on item 7.8, Year 3 Council Action Plan 2023-24. We've got Nad Aboud in person. Natalie. Yes, and I'm writing back to you.
Hello everyone, thanks for hearing my question. The question is related to the urban forest strategy, which I love as much as all of you do, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge that that strategy has made a few enemies along the way because some of the city's tree-related issues have become a little bit, have caused unnecessary consternation. So I've been contacted by somebody who lives in front of a tree that's heavily infested with gall, and they've asked Council that the tree be replaced or pruned. And when they had the guy visit the tree to have a look at whether that should happen, he told them that he wasn't going to touch the tree because it was an established tree. And it is an established tree, but it's also dying from a gall infestation and dropping the big clumps of gall. This is not a citrus tree. They're big clumps of gall that I think you might get a couple of photos, but whether that happens or not, they're big clumps of gall that then kill the branch and then the branch falls off. So, and when you read about gall online, it says stuff like, often considered detrimental for the host, or prune and destroy gall-infested twigs and branches, burn, blah, blah, blah. Like it's kind of dramatic. That does say destroy the infected plants. So while the city's urban forest strategy aims to double the tree canopy, my question is related to the quality of the tree canopy, and I'm wondering if work could be done to address the quality of the canopy as well as the number of trees that council is responsible for. So to formalise the question, when considering the urban forest strategy in relation to complaints or queries about trees, what weight does the council put on the quality of the canopy or the tree, even in an established tree? And the second question is, will the council review the urban forest strategy? It's not due to come back till 2027, so you'd have to bring it forward, or create a separate piece of work that looks at tree health and canopy quality rather than just a basic assessment of whether the tree is established or not, and with a view to helping people to understand that not all trees are created equal and that good trees are better than not good trees. Thank you.
Thanks, Nat. I'll refer your questions on to the Director of City Infrastructure, Anita Curnow.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Nat, for your questions. In relation to question 1, the health and condition of a tree is a primary consideration for council officers when responding to complaints or queries about individual trees. And this generally means an evaluation of whether a tree is healthy, safe and free of pests and diseases, and differs from the quality of the canopy, the different measures, which may consider canopy size, spread and density. Canopy quality in itself is not given weight in that decision-making process. But in certain situations where tree protection is a consideration, such as it relates to development, council may assign a value to a tree. And the purpose of this valuation is to recognise the time and resources needed to grow a tree in our harsh urban environment, while emphasising the loss of amenity for the community if the tree is damaged or removed. And this is done using a formula that considers tree size, species, aesthetics, location and condition. And in this case, weighting is given to the shape and condition of the canopy, including whether it's full and balanced, lopsided, how fast or slow it's growing, and whether it has structural or disease problems. A tree with a full, healthy, balanced canopy will be of a higher value than a tree which is declining, lopsided, or has structural problems. In relation to your second question, council officers are currently reviewing data on the health and quality of Merri-bek's urban tree canopy, which was collected by aircraft in special multi-spectrum cameras in 2023. And these cameras can measure the health of individual leaves and tree canopies, including their size, spread and density, to provide an objective measurement of the health and quality of our urban forest. And this work relates to one of the KPIs of the urban forest strategy to measure and monitor the health of the urban forest. The urban forest strategy is not a static thing. There are a lot of actions happening ongoing under that strategy, and we're constantly improving our approaches to measuring the tree canopy and the health of the canopy. And this work builds on aerial imagery data collected since 2009, combined with highly accurate LiDAR data that was collected in 2021. And that measures the extent of the canopy cover and forecast growth as well, all the way to 2050. And these technologies are constantly improving and give more and more precise results and more confidence. So before the recent data collection, we hadn't been able to measure the health of our urban tree canopy, and we're constantly reporting that and updating it on our Conversations Merri-bek Urban Forest Strategy page.
So could the tree be seen again?
So I wasn't aware of the specific example that you introduced.
Has anyone received photos of that? All right,
I'm happy to take that information and
all
follow
right,
it up.
I'll get in touch with you. Thanks so much for hearing me.
Thank you, Nat. Yes, so councillors, the first 30 minutes has elapsed. Do we still have questions? So you'd like to move to extend question time? Yeah, seconded by Councillor Panopoulos to move. Councillor Pavlidis to second. Yep. All those in favour? Yeah, I declare that carried. We'll now move on to statements on item 8.1, the notice of motion celebration of International Mother Language Day. So we have Alam Mahbub here with us in person to make a statement.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Alam Mahbub. You can hear me? Yep. I'm one of the members of Melbourne Bangla School, and I'm the chief advisor of this school. We have been running this school for the last 8 years, since 2017. So as you know that Bangladesh is the only one country in the world that fought for mother tongue. I'll briefly overview the history, why it is International Mother Language Day. Then I'll try to tell you the significance of observing this day around the world. Bangladesh was a part of Pakistan. Before 1971, it was East Pakistan, and the current Pakistan was West Pakistan. We have been separated in 1971 through a bloodshed war. Before that, in 1947, Pakistan was independent from the British government, and Bangladesh was a part of that. In 1948, the Governor General of Pakistan of the time, Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, visited Bangladesh. During his visit, he declared that Urdu shall be the state language of Pakistan. Immediately, some students from Dhaka University and political activists protested and asked him to withdraw his statement. But it did not went well. That's why the language movement started. It went until 21st of February 1952. On that day, there was a protest in Dhaka, and 5 people, including few students and activists, were killed by the police. Since then, movement went on. In 1956, Pakistan government declared Bangla to be the state language. Since then, Bangladeshi people observe these days. They go to the Shohid Mina, the language monument in Dhaka, next to the medical college, and we show our sorrow, we show our respect and gratitude to the language martyrs. So the history did not end at the time. In 1998, 2 people living in Canada, Mr. Rafiqul Islam and Abdul Salam, they wrote a letter to the Secretary General of United Nations, Mr. Kofi Annan, saying that there should be all around the world an International Mother Language Day. They suggested 21st February should be the Mother Language Day to show the respect for the language matters. And later on, in 1999, Bangladesh Parliament accepted this resolution as well and formally forwarded a proposal to the United Nations. And UNESCO, as you know, declared 21st February as the Mother Language Day on November 17, 1999. And it happened under the leadership of Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. She's also a Prime Minister at the moment.
Dr. Mahbub, sorry, you're over your 3 minutes, so if I could just ask you to wrap up.
Yes.
That'd be great, thanks.
As you know that many of the languages in the world are endangered, they are on the way of extinction. So the movement signifies that it is very important to preserve the language, including Aboriginal language. So that was everything from my side. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your statement. We now have a statement on the same topic by Rati Hall, maybe? Rati in person? And Rati, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, honorable audience. It's Rafi, not Rati.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all good.
Must be a typo.
I wouldn't take much time of yours.
Yeah.
Now, as I'm the resident of Wyndham Council, so as a part of the honor of International Mother Language Day, so the Shahid Minar is being situated in Wyndham Council. I was part of it. So what happens since 2017, every year, 21st of February, for the sake of the honor of International Mother Language, it gets celebrated from all the ethnicities and all the cultural people that comes and know about their mother tongue, how it gets celebrated and other stuff. And as you know, that it's being encouraged by the government. It's the multicultural country, so it is one of the day that people can know about, study about their mother tongue, because most of us at least speak on one or two languages. So it is being encouraged, and I have seen that a lot of enthusiasm on a lot of people, especially on young people. So my humble request would be that if it is something that we can spread out these all over the young people, especially for the next generation, that'd be really great. Thanks very much.
Cool. Thanks, Ralphie.
Cheers.
We have a few questions submitted on non-agenda items, and if we have extra time, I can return back to some other statements. So first up, Luke Marinelli is in person, who has a question about pet registration and a statement about Brunswick West. Luke, are you here in person? We might not have Luke. Is Xander online? Great. So Xander Dean, who presented the petition on Harding Street Bridge, also has two questions. So we'll bring Xander to the online room. On Harding Street Bridge also has two questions. So we'll bring Xander to the online room. Xander, you may need to mute the audio stream you're listening to, others it'll be a bit echoey.
I'm so sorry. This is now Laura. Can you hear me?
Yes. Laura, are you able to turn your camera on?
Yeah, I've got troubles. I don't know if can you see anything?
We can't see anything, but we can see that you've tried to turn your camera on. Look, we might just, if you want to ask your two questions.
Okay, sorry. Xander's just gone. He's still at the bridge, but I'm taking this call because, anyway. So thanks for letting me ask my questions. I'll be brief. But basically, one of the questions is, so the new Harding Street Bridge is the council released some images that show that the new Harding Street Bridge is going to be built next to the old historic suspension bridge, what seems like about 20 metres away. And so I guess we've got the question of why does the suspension bridge even need to be demolished if there could be a small tweak to the plans that essentially save the bridge that has a lot of value and a lot of people love the bridge. If it's not necessary, why is it being demolished? We've sort of had a thought that maybe it's about the costs of maintaining the current bridge. Now, because of the current bridge's design, it's segmented, so it can be repaired in segments, which is a fairly cost-effective way of having a bridge set up. And from our memory, and I've asked around a lot of people, we haven't seen much maintenance of that bridge, and I don't know how much maintenance has been put into the bridge since the 80s when it was built. So I guess what are the costs, the projected costs of maintaining the current bridge? And in total, what are the costs that have been incurred to date by the Merri-bek Council, or the Moreland Council as it was, on maintaining the Harding Street Bridge since it was constructed in the 1980s? Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to refer your questions onto the Director of City Infrastructure. So Anita, if you'd like to respond.
Thanks, Mayor, and through you, thanks, Laura. I'll address two of your questions. So the old bridge cannot be retained and the new bridge constructed, even though visually it might appear that there's some distance between them. In actual fact, the footings overlap, and it's a very complex environment for building a bridge, and so it's not possible to build the new bridge and retain the old bridge on the Harding Street side. Even if this were not the case, the guess that you had that the cost of maintenance is considerable is accurate, and the ongoing cost of maintaining the old bridge does make it prohibitive. Our road management plan requires the bridge to be inspected at different levels in different frequencies. So level 1 inspection every year, level 2 inspection every 3 years. And these inspections can each be quite expensive. They can be several $1,000s each. But also, as the bridge gets older, those inspections then show up issues that need to be addressed, and more reactive maintenance is required. And this type of bridge is a very particular type of bridge that involves particular skills to maintain, and is particularly difficult to access and keep workers safe while they're doing maintenance. And so it does actually cost quite a lot to maintain that bridge ongoing. I don't have the specific details of the forward maintenance regime, but that has certainly been part of the consideration in making the decision that it's not possible to retain the existing bridge and build the new one.
Thank you, Anita. Next up, we have a question in person from Helen Kratzman on road safety, Nicholson Street, Coburg.
Good evening, councillors. Between 2014 and 2016, 3 people were killed crossing the road within 100 metres of the Holmes-Nicholson-Moreland intersection. This began an 8-year community campaign to reduce road danger on this state-controlled arterial road. Yesterday, $1.27 million in funding was announced in the 2024-25 state budget. The work will include electronic variable speed limit signage, electronic travel speed warning signs, dragon teeth pavement markings and yellow paint on the road at pedestrian crossings. We've been asking for it for such a long time, I can hardly believe we've got the funding. I wanted to personally thank council officers, in particular the transport team, for their work, and councillors for their work and their ongoing support, and council's ongoing advocacy. People in the area share common themes about Nicholson Street, like no one drives to the speed limit, or motorists drive through the red lights, through the pedestrian crossings all the time. And the observations are correct. Council conducted a speed survey which found that the average 24-hour weekday traffic volume increased from 18,540 vehicle movements in March 2020 to 20,180 in October 2022. The 85th percentile speed dropped only by 1.5 kilometres an hour, despite the speed limit reducing from 60 kilometres an hour to 50 kilometres an hour at that location. I would like to ask Council to conduct a speed survey along Nicholson Street after the newly funded infrastructure has been delivered. This will measure the impact of the new infrastructure, and it will support future requests for speed cameras to ensure compliance with speed limits.
Thank you, Helen. And just before I pass on to Director to respond to that question, just well done.
Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts to make that part of our community safer. It's been tireless. So sorry, Anita.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Helen. I will pass on your comments to the transport team. We're very happy to organise some speed surveys to be done following a reasonable delay after the infrastructure is put in. We know it takes a little bit of time for traffic to settle their patterns, but once a few months has passed, we will organise that and make that happen.
Lovely. And I'm really grateful that Council could figure out a way to do it with the tram tracks. So I am particularly grateful to Council and Transport team for that work. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you. So we do have some time left, so I'll, Kelly, if you wish to make your statement that was submitted, I invite you to come up and make your statement.
Hi, my name is Kelly. My residence borders on Hoskin Reserve. So out of my 3 children, 1 was born early. They were way before their due date, so they suffer from lung issues stemming from their early birth and respiratory distress problems. my husband and I actively manage their exposure to poor air quality, dust and debris, as we're extremely mindful of the limitations of their respiratory system and increased sensitivity to lung irritants such as smoke, pollution and dust. And if you've got children who've ever seen them turn blue because they can't breathe, you would probably do the same. For many months, I've watched transport heavy machinery move through the north and east fields in close proximity to my yard, excavating and tearing up most of the north field of the reserve. In December last year, my neighbours and I had significant issues with dust swarming up over our fences, into our properties, into our homes. There were successive days where I was unable to put washing on the line because it was getting covered in dust, muck and debris. I made several complaints at this time to Council and the EPA. The site was poorly managed in relation to dust control. I was assured by Council that dust suppression was occurring. It was not. More often than not, the truck wasn't there, the water truck. We were not aware of contamination at that point. We weren't aware that it was a problem, and we weren't aware that it was being managed as such. We were just concerned about the amount of dust in the air. It covered our backyard, our windows, and surfaces inside our homes. Our eyes stung, our throats burnt, and the kids couldn't be outside for any length of time before coughing, and if they were talking, they were saying, "Mummy, my throat is sore." So when we received a letter in January stating that asbestos had been found at Hoskin, there's no words that articulate the fear, the concern and the worry that I had after being blanketed by dust from here for months. So you tell us there's no risk, and you tell us that there's no problem if there's no machinery going in and out. There was machinery going in and out of Hoskin for months. They dug up everything for months. And now you're telling us that, oh, it was okay because asbestos is okay if it's non-friable. Well, that machinery would have made any asbestos friable, and it's now in my backyard. It's in my home, and you're telling me that there's no risk to myself and my children, especially my premature one with scarred lungs. So, considering your track record with the residents of Merlinston, why should I believe anything that you say about there not being asbestos in Hoskin or in those mounds? Council, you have glossed over any concerns the community have had about Hoskin for years. My anger at the thought of this project being so badly mismanaged, and after all we've had to endure from Council and from the Silica Club, is so significant, but nothing is worse than the deep concern that I have for the health of my family and especially my children.
Thank you, Kelly, for your statement. Well, now that brings us to an end of the... It was submitted as a statement, and the resident didn't say it was a question, they said it was a statement. So we'll now move on to council reports. So the first item we have to consider is item 7.1, Hoskin Reserve Master Plan. I can see Councillor Bolton's on her feet.
I've got an alternative motion I was going to move, and it's got two additional elements in addition to what was published in the council agenda. So I've got two additional points. One is to remove the mounds on the east and west of the north pitch and landscape the area, improve lines of sight and passive surveillance at a cost of $90,000. So that is 2.C. And I've got a second point, 3.A, which is expand the area next to the shed path between the community space and active recreation zone, item 2.B above, so that it consumes up to 14 car parking spaces, taking the number of parking spaces from 33 more than the master plan to 19 more than the master plan at a cost of $40,000. And I think that's it. Yep, that's accurate on the screen. And
So
if I have a seconder, I'll
do we have a
speak to
seconder
it.
for Councillor Bolton's alternative? Councillor Hart to second? Councillor Bolton to speak to your...
Thank you, Mayor. This report appeared really as a result of a resident, Peter, who came to the March Council meeting and raised queries about this, and other residents raising questions as well. And then actually Monica and I, Councillor Hart and I actually went and visited the site in March, late March, and I moved a notice of motion for the April council meeting, but ended up withdrawing in lieu of a guarantee that this report would come before everyone tonight. And I'm glad I did that, because I think it's good to get this report from council officers about all of the issues. I also went to visit Hoskin Reserve on Saturday to have a look from another vantage point from the laneway, and the mounds absolutely do enclose the area around the soccer pitch, and I don't see this as a pro-soccer or anti-soccer argument. I suspect the soccer club doesn't really care whether the mounds are there or not. I think it's really from a safety point of view, the mounds are important. To remove the mounds is important for 3 or 4 reasons. One, for people who've got kids of multiple age groups. If you're supervising children at the young children's playground, you can't see your children riding around the soccer field because of the mounds, and you can't see across to the passive recreation space and the active recreation space. Before construction, Hoskin Reserve was very open. You could see right across the reserve. Secondly, it's clear that some of the older women in the area do feel frightened, because there is a sense of isolation walking around the path, around the soccer field, the north soccer field, because of the mounds. You can't see who's around in the reserve. And with all the reports about violence against women of late, I think that it is well justified fear. Then from the dog walker's point of view, people say that you can't see another boisterous dog heading towards your dog, which makes it harder for you to control your dog, because you get surprised when they come across the top of the mound. And then the issues which Kelly can speak to from the adjacent neighbours. The second thing that I'm proposing is, which is a potential danger area, is where there's a car park in between the passive open space, or commonly known as the East Field, and the active recreation zone. And we all know when excitable children go charging off, they don't necessarily stop to look for cars or whatever, and they could be charging through the car park, which separates the two areas. I know that officers I'll just finishing on this point, I know that council officers have included a path, but there's no guarantee that excitable children will stick to that path. So I'm proposing just a few more car park spaces be removed to make sure that this is safe for children who might get excited and run through the car park.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Hart is seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Oops, sorry.
It's on, all good.
Yeah, it's on, okay, Tom. Well, before I came to council, Hoskin Park's been extremely dear to me. It always felt like an oasis to go up to Merliston and have that such expanse of that open reserve and parkland. And certainly when I came to council, one of the first meetings was, of course, the contentious meeting about the East Field on Hoskin. And I certainly don't see this discussion now, particularly around some of the areas, particularly around the mounds and the car park. I certainly don't see it as an extension of that debate. I see that this is a way to ensure that what we are delivering to Hoskin is consistent with the master plan and all the work and the consultation that's been part of it. I was concerned. I think I'd seen. I think when I was off council, I'd seen some comments about what was happening up there. I knew Sue was meeting with people and went up to also be part of that, and that was late March. And there are a number of people in the community who met with us, not necessarily all the same people who are here tonight, but there were certainly people with children, certainly older women who met and expressed their real concerns about the mounds. And the issues that were coming up were issues of safety, issues of visibility, and a really important issue, which I think is about connectivity, so that you're not actually got mounds that separate off that north field from the rest of Hoskin Reserve. And that's about safety, it's about line of vision. But it also establishes that sense, I think, of a reserve that's very complete, with an integrity that's across the whole site. I think having the mounds which essentially isolate and divide that north field from the rest of Hoskin, and particularly from the east and the community area, is really not in the interest of the community, and it's also not in the interest of the way forward, I think, for this project. And I think that hearing the concerns about the dust, the asbestos on the site, despite what's been said by council, those concerns are going to stay there. And the only way forward that I can see is if those mounds are actually removed. We've had a costing. The costing is $90,000 to remove them. This was presented to council that this was going to be a great cost saving, but I think we've got the dollars to be able to remove those mounds. The second part, I think I also agree with Councillor Bolton, is to extend that safety, and again around that connectivity between across the car park and over to around the rest of that sort of North Field area. So I think that the items that she's put really strengthen that motion, and I'd urge council to have a good debate and a really good think about what our responsibility is.
Thank you, Councillor Hart.
Thank you.
Do we have any councillors who wish to speak against this motion? Councillor Carly Hannon.
So just to clarify, is there a particular, because I just missed the part about the motion, is there a particular motion put forward by Councillor Bolton and Councillor Hart being debated right now?
Yes,
Or
so
this
can you, they've moved an alternate, which is projected. Can you see it, the projected on your screen?
Yeah.
There's
okay, great.
a slight change to 2C and then 3A and a very small change to 3B.
Okay, great. All right, so there's so much different stuff getting talked about tonight that it's kind of hard to piece it all together. But I think in terms of the mounds specifically, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I am frustrated to see another complaint about Hoskin Reserve. Like, I just feel like for the passion and investment and hard work that we've put together, working with every stakeholder in this facility, to have some complaints and make them as dramatic as this about these mounds, to me, really is nonsensical. I don't see this as a surveillance issue whatsoever. I don't think that these are like, you know, huge mounds that are preventing you from being able to see your kids. I mean, I've got a toddler. You have to watch your toddlers 24/7, no matter what they're doing. And of course, you're always watching them before they run towards car parks. Like, these things are just arguments in order for us to continuously, I don't even know what we're trying to do here actually, but continuously appease a very, very, very small minority who find fault in everything that they possibly can and do bring it back to the original master plan that they weren't happy with. In terms of these mounds, like, I think that they're great. I haven't gone down to see them, but I know that so many other clubs have mounds like this. And again, with young children, I've never seen children that don't love a mound to roll down. So I can't see why this is becoming a family issue and an issue around residents versus the club. Like, this seems to be probably a very nice aspect of the master plan. But I also wanted to speak specifically to this idea of not following the master plan, because I heard tonight for the first time a lot of the concessions that have been made around the hybrid now being a half hybrid, and around the gymnasium not going forward and the prayer room not going forward. Now, I heard that all of these were a consideration made to keep costs down, and yet suddenly we have a debate here tonight to then add another $100,000 in costs because of not following the master plan. But then I would argue, well, then all those things should go back on the agenda and be actually fulfilled so that we're perfectly following our master plan. So I think I'll leave it at that because I am struggling with my first night back to follow everything that's going on. But hopefully with the rest of the debate, I'll hear what other councillors have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Kylie Hannon. Does any councillor wish to speak to this item? Councillor Panopoulos?
Thanks, Mayor. So I'm happy to be speaking in favour of this alternative motion that Councillor Bolton has put forward. And so I think many of the reasons as to why this has been pulled together have been outlined quite clearly. But I'd mostly just like to lay out, I guess, the process of how we've reached what is compromise on both sides and attempted to collaborate in what's been a really long and drawn-out process. And so I'd like to thank officers and residents and the club for the time and effort that they've put into this, and acknowledge that this hasn't been easy and it's been going on for quite a few years, but I think that we are landing somewhere that does work to find some sort of compromise in the middle there. So I think we're doing our best here in terms of looking forward for what the current residents need in that space, but also what future residents and future users of the space need as well. And it's important that as councillors, we're looking not just for the people who are living there at the moment or at the club at the moment, but for those 10, 20 years in the future. So just to go through, there have been a lot of adjustments made, and that's, around the deviating of the shared path, creating a shared path between the community space and the active rec zone with new fencing. We've got the amendment to remove the mounds, as well as other stuff around parking restrictions and I guess trying to manage that a bit better. And so to that end, just whilst I am generally speaking in favour of this, I'm going to foreshadow an amendment on 3A around the parking in that area. I'm just, to bring it back, to the officer recommendation, I'm just a bit concerned that if we do reduce the parking in that particular car spot, it will push more of those cars back out onto the resident streets. And we've heard a lot over the years about the congestion and traffic issues. And so I think it's different to other situations where we generally try to discourage more parking around the municipality. But I think in this situation, the demand is already there, so we're not inducing demand here. And I'd just be concerned about the flow-on impact that has for residents in the immediate streets and beyond. But other than that, I'm really quite pleased with this motion that's been put forward and the fact that it does have so many of those adjustments that were made following the drop-in sessions and the community meetings that were held, and having been at the site, having gone by in the past week or so, I do understand some of the concerns that have been raised by residents. I will touch very briefly on the contamination issue in 10 seconds, just to say that it is unfortunate that a lot of our sites across Merri-bek do have contamination because of their past industrial, mixed-use history. This is something that we take very seriously, and as Anita outlined earlier, we're really doing our best to stay on top of within the guidelines. So, yep.
So, Councillor Panopoulos, are you moving that amendment now then?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Yeah. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Riley to second. Yeah. So,
I'll just clarify what that amendment was. So that was at 3A, to go back to the officer recommendation, which was about expanding the area next to the shared path between the community space and active rec zone so that it consumes up to 8 parking spaces, taking the number of parking spaces from 33 more than the master plan to 25 more than the master plan, whereas the amendment, I think, takes it down to 19. Was that the number? Yeah, 19. So,
yeah, and so, sorry, Councillor Riley, were you hoping to second that?
Yes, happy to the substantive motion that Councillor Bolton said that, not the original, but yes, exactly what you meant. I think, yeah thanks.
Sure.
So you kind of spoke to your amendment already in your speech. So do you want to speak to it as seconder?
Yeah, look, I'm more than happy to support the mound adjustment. I wasn't overly supportive of this, and I've been abused by some of the advocates over it. It's the first time in 7.5 years I've ever been abused on the phone and actually called names and put downs. And given the work I do in non-violence, I'm pretty horrified about that. So I'll put that aside, and I am prepared to support this reasonable adjustment. I heard the argument from Councillor Carly Hannon about the costings, and I get that is very fair, a very fair argument. But the good news is today we've actually got costings that show we can actually do this for under 100,000 and not a great deal more. We've got plenty of other uses for that money, so I'm very reluctant to do this, but happy to support this motion as a way of moving forward on it. But I think the car parks don't need to be removed. We've already made compromises there, and the residents have let their feelings know about timekeeping on other streets, and we've accommodated that. So we've done a lot of engagement. I just want to thank the officers for all their great work engaging and listening to our communities. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anyone wish to speak against that? So we're debating the amendment itself. So Councillor Yildiz?
I want to speak against Councillor Bolton's.
Yeah, so let's deal with the amendment first and then we can come back to that, but good to know. Councillor Bolton, speaking against the amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to speak against the amendment. Once it was pointed out to me that an earlier version of the master plan actually had a continuous band of sort of parkland between the open space and the active recreation zone. But then the later versions of the master plan brought the car park back further. It's a bit hard to explain without showing the map, which would create the potential dynamic of boisterous children running through the car park between the two recreation areas. And I'm thinking from the point of view of safety. Sure, I understand all the car parking issues, but from the point of view of safety, it's unlikely that a lot of active children are going to walk over to the little 1.5 metre path and sedately walk along that little path. They're more likely to just charge out like we know little kids do and race between different zones within the Hoskin Reserve. And so that's why I was proposing that really the car park really just come to the border between the tennis club and the active recreation zone. And I counted out the number of car park spaces, which is 14. So that's why I just think it's an accident waiting to happen if there's a car park in between two recreation zones in a park.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I'll just speak briefly to the amendment. I think a lot of what you've said, Councillor Bolton, still stands with this amendment. It consumes up to 8 rather than 14 car parks. And so I feel like officers have heard that feedback and they've made the changes which are in the officer recommendation this evening, and just would be worried about making further changes and pushing cars back out onto streets, which we've heard from residents is a concern of theirs, which is why we're putting in the parking restrictions. So I think the officer recommendation still achieves much of what Councillor Bolton has talked about, but doesn't push cars back out into the roads. So do you want to speak to the amendment?
I agree. I think, if anything...
So you'll just speak to the amendment.
Because if anything, the residents in and around Palace Street and in and around Bakers Road find it quite challenging during match days and even training to park in front of their own properties. I think reducing the number of car parks is going to cause more distress for residents. So I think it's ridiculous that we would even contemplate reducing the number of car parks. There are ample car parks allocated, so if anything, I would definitely be supporting less cars being parked on the road.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Do any other councillors wish to speak for or against this amendment? Sorry, Councillor Davidson.
Yes, so I just wanted to address both the points in relation to the small hills and the car parking. I think we're here again, and I can share Councillor Carly Hannan's frustration in relation to this. But from my view and from...
No, can I interrupt? I can't hear. I don't know whether it's me.
It's on
but
green.
I'm-
Sorry.
Yeah, speak and speak, it's better.
Yeah, so I was just saying I share Councillor Carly Hannan's frustration on this matter. We've been here in this chamber numerous times before. The master plan has been consulted on thoroughly, and negotiations have taken place resulting in agreed collective vision for the master plan that we have today. And there's been part performance on that. Construction has occurred and is well underway. We've got these mould hills that have been placed there, and resources have been allocated towards realising this collective vision for Hoskin Reserve. During the consultation process, the negotiations saw concessions made and compromises agreed to from all stakeholders to balance the competing interests involved. It's very easy to raise issues with many aspects of the master plan and similarly to raise strong points in support of them. In relation to the small hills, the moulds, to remove them, we hear about residents raising issues in relation to dust. This is itself going to create more dust. The arguments that have been put forward in relation to the hills, the small mole hills, are not compelling at all. It's a huge over-dramatisation. I think to attack councillors on council in relation to this is very poor and shows the quality of the arguments being put forward tonight. In relation to the parking, I won't be supporting the removal of parking places at Hoskins Reserve. Again, the arguments are nonsensical. Removing parking would force people who are using the facility to park on the street, causing more issues for residents themselves. And then finally, if we start undoing what has been heavily negotiated, and part of that is to physically remove the small hilled areas between the fields, which will soon be covered in grass, which in my opinion will look lovely, you're opening up a Pandora's box of various ways to unravel the hard work of all the people who have taken this master plan so seriously by pandering to the views of a small, angry minority.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. So we're still on the amendment. So let's, anyone else want to specifically speak to the amendment, and the others will vote on it and then go back to the substantive?
Just clarifying, so Councillor Davidson's spoken about this amendment that Councillor Panopoulos has put forward, and also about Councillor Bolton's.
Yeah,
So
both
can we-
Councillor Riley
can-
and Councillor Davidson talked about
Okay,
both
so-
issues, but
so-
this is on the amendment.
Okay, so can I just have 1 minute to also talk about the
So
overall...
let's deal with the amendment, then we can go back to the standard debate, and then you can have 3 minutes to
Okay,
talk
all right,
about
done.
it. Yeah. So, well, now, do you want a right of reply on the amendment?
let's just
No.
vote.
You want to speak to the amendment specifically?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Hart.
Yeah. In particular, I just wanted to speak just to the point of difference in the amendment, which, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand it's in relation to the removal of the car parks and that connectivity and the safety issue. Okay. And just thank you to Anita for the printout that you did have done, I think, to show what that would look like. And I just would like to, I understand those arguments that have been put up, you know, about the concern around that it's actually pushing cars back up onto the street. But I just want to stress that Councillor Bolton's reason for particularly addressing that was around the safety issues, and it was particularly around just the safety issues for children. And when I look at those plans and the ones that have been put forward to say this is what it would look like, I can actually see that even that it's to me like a little bit of a buffer zone that sits between that sort of southern area and all those amenities around the tennis courts, and that it just provides a little bit of a buffer zone between the car park and the two areas. So I can certainly, I don't like seeing cars pushed back on the street, but I can see the rationale that's being put forward, and pictorially I can see the benefit of that.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. So Councillor Panopoulos has indicated she doesn't want her right of reply to the, Councillor Pavlidis, is this to speak specifically to the amendment? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Pavlidis.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Just basically say I do agree with the comments that Councillor Olivia Hannon made, and also Councillor Davidson. I find it very interesting because I did visit Hoskin Reserve on Monday, walked around the whole site.
So Councillor Pavlidis, are you going to talk specifically just about 3A, about, if you're going to talk about the mounds?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry, Kate. Yeah, the parking. Yep, that's fine.
Go ahead.
I will, in respect to, I hear what Councillor Bolton is saying about the parking. However, how would removing additional parking make this any different to any child being supervised at any other park or any other car park or any road that we currently have? There's a car park adjoining Powlett Street as well, so are we going to remove it from there as well? It's the responsibility of the parents to supervise their children and not let them run where in a car park or near a road. No, I don't. Well, I understand the safety issue. It's not for us to make sure that children do not run where they shouldn't be running.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. So we'll move on to voting on this amendment, and then we can revert back to the substantive debate. And I know there's other councillors that want to speak to that. So all those in favour, sorry.
Adam, could I foreshadow as well, just as a procedure, that I would be moving the officer recommendations?
Yep, sure. Yeah. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to voting on this amendment. So all those councillors in favour of this amendment? We've got Councillor Pavlidis, Councillor Carly Hannon, Councillor Tapanos, Councillor Panopoulos. Sorry, we haven't had a division, but I'm sure we'll call a division, so I'll just call a division. So Councillor Pavlidis, Councillor Tapanos, Councillor Carly Hannon, I believe, had her hand up just before. Yep, I'm nodding. Councillor Panopoulos, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Yildiz, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Riley. All those against? Councillor Bolton, Councillor Hart. I declare that amendment carried. So that becomes part of the substantive, which is just reverting back to what was in the agenda, so that was circulated around. So now we return back to the substantive debate, and I think we only had the mover, seconder, and Councillor Panopoulos speaking to that. So Councillor Yildiz, do you wish to speak against?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually visited the site, and I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this question, but the councillors that haven't visited the site, I'd highly recommend that you do. And the mounds that we're talking about, look, and you look at the officer recommendations, I'm going to support the officers only because day in, day out, they are there. Day in, day out, they are looking at what the best outcomes for that project are. And having stood at the mounds, it's actually in the benefit of the residents, not the club, to remove that, because once those mounds get removed and we've just got grass there, what do you think the club's going to do when they've got excess training, or they've got players that can't use the main facilities? They're going to try and use the flat area, which is where the mound is going to be once it's removed. But more importantly, those that watch football, soccer, and have a look at how other grounds and other facilities have done it, they've actually brought in mounds, brought in soil deliberately to create mounds. Go to Albert Park Golf Course, they are putting in mounds for viewers to be able to see during the Grand Prix. We're going to save $90,000 of ratepayers' money by leaving the current mounds where they are. When you do watch a football game, naturally most people go straight to the fence line, and they'll, kneel over and rest their elbows onto the fence and watch the game. But then you've got, if it's a pretty popular game, you're going to have people that want to stand up higher at the back to be able to see what's going on the pitch. I just think it's silly to waste a further $90,000, and we have got qualified, experienced engineers. Our staff, we've got to have the confidence in our staff who are there, and they've highly recommended this and they've been as objective as they can. They've said openly, this is in the best interest of not just the club, this is in the best interest of the residents, it's in the best interest of everybody. And you think about what we're doing. And you know what I was really proud of? The amount of open space that we've created that wasn't there, usable open space, that wasn't there before this project. And I know residents are going to be upset, and naturally some are pretty upset about what's going on, but I really do believe once this is completed, hopefully by the end of July, I think that frustration level is going to come down, because what I can see already there is going to be one of the biggest achievements, I believe, of what this council's done in the last 10 years. It's way better than CB Smith Reserve, because CB Smith Reserve is a football facility. This is not a football facility. This is a precinct for everybody to use.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion or against? Sorry, Councillor Pavlidis, did you wish to speak against this motion? Or?
Yeah, I'm just going to finish off what I was saying earlier.
Sure.
I tend to agree with what Councillor Yildiz said. I also did attend the site and had it walked around and stood on top of the mounds. And putting my sort of parent hat on, I would have thought, for me, it would be more pleasing to have them there as a complete separation from the soccer pitch, because the one thing I do recall hearing many times over during this whole process in the last 3.5 years is how everything is for the soccer club. Now, obviously provided an avenue where it's separated. You've got your recreation area and it's completely separated to where the soccer pitch is, and now we're hearing that residents aren't happy with that either. So to me, like I said, I stood on top of that mound. I could not see to any of the neighbours' properties. And by the time when you add the grass and the trees, everything to it, I think it will look absolutely stunning. We're not the only reserve, only ground that has mounds, and we're talking about line of visibility. Go walking around other municipalities and have a look at other large reserves and see how much visibility you have from the street for the whole reserve or park. Nothing further.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. Do any other councillors wish to speak for or against this motion as a whole? Move on to Councillor Bolton's right of reply.
Well, yes, Councillor Davidson is correct that there was, a lot of divergent views in the consultation around the master plan, and there was sort of an agreement at the end of the master plan. The problem is that these mounds were not part of the master plan, and so residents just suddenly noticed mounds of dirt. They didn't know what they were for. They thought it might have been some sort of construction or something. And then they gradually got bigger and bigger and they didn't seem to move. And then a question was asked at the March Council meeting. So this was not part of the master plan. It wasn't agreed to. It was never on the master plan. That's the point. And, I agree with Councillor Cully-Hannon. It is disappointing some of the other things aren't being put forward that were part of the master plan. But anyway, this issue is about the mounds. It's not about, pro or anti-soccer in my view. I like soccer, but this is not an issue about the soccer. This is an issue which parents have been raising. And I think the point you need to see to get a sense of the impact of the mounds is not at the top of the mounds, it's the bottom of the mounds. It's the bottom of the mounds because you can't see over the top of the mounds. That's why I moved this motion. If I didn't feel the residents had a good point, I would be honest and I'd say I respectfully disagree. But the more I've looked in the area, especially from the bottom of the mounds, and listened to the arguments, I actually think the residents have some good points. And it's not related to all the other disputes that happened over the master plan. They're new residents who've moved in since those disputes happened. So not all of the residents who live abutting the reserve
Thank you,
and around
Councillor
the reserve.
Bolton.
So I think we should be prepared. This was not on the master plan. I think the mounds need to go so that we have, passive surveillance, open space. This has not been subjected to a gender assessment, a gender equity assessment.
Thank you, Councillor
which
Bolton.
I believe all these things
So
are
we'll
meant
move
to
on
go
to voting on this item. All those in favour? I might just do a division from now. So Councillor Bolton, Councillor Hart, Councillor Riley, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Panopoulos. All those against? Councillor Davidson, Councillor Yildiz, Councillor Tapanos, Councillor Carly Hannan and Councillor Pavlidis. So that's a tie, 5 on 5, and I'm going to use my casting vote to vote in favour. So I declare that this motion is carried.
Ask for a division, please.
We did it.
Oh, yeah.
All good. So we'll move on to item 7.2, the Community Grant Program Annual Round Recommendation 2024. Do councillors have a motion? Yes, Councillor Riley.
Oh, I'm more than happy to move this, thanks. The officer's recommendation.
Yeah. Councillor Panopoulos to second. Councillor Riley.
Thanks. This is an important piece of work that we do every year, and we have several categories of grants that we make, from the regular community strengthening grants, which are sort of at the smaller sort of end of the scale. So we're sort of talking between 5,000 and 10,000, various ranges there, but up to the value of 118,000. We also then have organisational grants, value to up to about almost 40,000, but these go over 3 years. So we've actually got grants from the last year and the year before that are still being contributed to. So they're getting around $10,000 a year to develop those new organisations and to give them a chance to spring off and do some really valuable work in our city. And then we finally finish with the facility grants, which there's 270,000 plus. So this is considerable allocation to many groups across our city. There's a really good mix of cultural and linguistic diversity, and many other types of groups, be that sporting associated, people with disabilities, all sorts of groups of people, queer and GLBTIQA plus communities, many things that we're doing here. So this really ticks off many things that we're trying to do in our council plan, and I commend the officers, but I really want to commend all the people who've put their submissions up. We've actually managed to meet many of them. Far more than 50% are successful applicants. I think in the my allocation for the community strengthening, they're getting, I think it's about 70% of them have been successful. So this is a really good process. A lot of people put the hard work in and they get the results. But we also then guide those groups to get access other grants, or to come back again later and do it, or to try and to take the feedback from officers and to resubmit on a different stream. So there's a lot of learning that goes in place here, but this also complements what we're doing next month in the draft budget, which will be signing off on all of the community suggestions through the community budget process, which happened late last year and then came through the councillors' planning session, and we're now adding a lot of those. Unfortunately, many of those miss out, but in this case, this is a sign of where you can get fairly good hit rate. So both processes are important, and these ones really fit in with our council plan and goals. And I know there's a bit of feedback coming from various councils, but I think this is worth supporting very much. And thank everyone for all their hard work and contributions, and hope the money really has the impact you're seeking to have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Panopoulos, a seconder.
Nothing to add.
Any other councillor wish to? Councillor Pavlidis.
Nothing to add, thank you. But through you, Mayor, just to clarify, I did raise the issue of the dates that do appear on page 343 about the financial years, the director did come back and state that the financial years should be 1 year over. So where it says 23, 24, it should be 24, 25 and so on. So that's a correction on page 343 of the agenda.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. Councillor Bolton, do you wish to speak?
I just want to say that I think the process council is following with the community grants now is actually paying off, because at an earlier period, or a few years back, it felt like there were some groups were not really getting much of a go with the community grants, especially some of maybe the older migrant groups. And I think now that the council is directly making contact with groups whose grant applications have not been recommended, to give them advice on the grant process, what might be the best grants to apply for, et cetera, I think it means that now there's a bit more of a diverse range of organisations are getting grants, and I think that's really important, because, you know, we don't want grants to just go to the more well-heeled groups, but to a wide range of groups, including groups that might, you know, struggle to be able to go through the whole bureaucratic process of applying for a grant. So I'd just like to note that that's been, I think that's been good that council's been doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? I declare that carried. Item 7.3, Merri-bek Planning Scheme Amendment, Brunswick Activity Centre Zone, Decision Gateway 1. Sorry, Councillor Panopoulos, yes?
I'd like to move the officer recommendation.
Okay, yes. And Councillor Tapanos, is that to second? Yeah, great.
Yes, it is.
Great. Okay, Councillor Panopoulos.
Great, thanks, Mayor. So I'd like to, begin by outlining the process of where we've been and where we're up to today in terms of this Brunswick Activity Centre Zone Gateway 1. So we've had quite a few community consultation processes already. So this kicked off in phase 1, seeking broad ideas from the community back towards the latter half of 2021. And then from April to June 2022, we heard feedback on the activity centre zone. And then we heard further feedback in August and September of the following year. And so today we're at Gateway 1, which will start the amendment process. And this will continue on for about a year and a half by the time that we get to Gateway 3, with ample opportunity for further consultation. So this really, is quite a long process that's only just begun in the formal parts of it. Now, there's been, a bit of commentary around what many people are saying about the floor space requirements for commercial use. Now, this emerged out of a huge piece of work that our council officers undertook, where they figured out that we need to create so much more space for people to have jobs here in Merri-bek. To be clear about the commercial floor space requirement, and we had a question about this, it would only apply to the multi-use precinct, which is 1/3 of the area of the proposed activity centre zone. And of that, 92% of that precinct would have a discretionary requirement for commercial floor space. So this is a pretty small, teeny tiny actually, area of the proposed activity centre zone. To pull it out to the even bigger picture, we know that the market has failed to provide commercial floor space that we know that we need for jobs for people here in Merri-bek. And it's, I think, the role of us as a council to guide what kind of developments happen here and to encourage our core activity centres of Brunswick to be vibrant places. Now, we've of course, some developers will try to claim that this will drive up the price of doing development. They'll try and complain when we try to introduce better environmental standards, when we try to introduce affordable housing provisions around mandatory inclusionary zoning. I think that we need to be really clear that the current status quo isn't working to provide the job outcomes that we need in the core parts in those specific areas within the proposed activity centre zone. So I think that we need to look at some of our neighbouring municipalities, for example, just like in Moonee Valley, especially along Mount Alexander Road and around Puckle Street, where you can see all of their shop fronts, where they've got apartments on top, shops at the bottom, and they are really creating a vibrant precinct there. So, look, I'm moving this to really kick off the engagement process, and so I hope councillors will be able to vote in favour of it. I think that this does work really hard to address some of the live music, affordable housing, livability, and I guess the shopfront and commercial elements that we need out of an activity centre zone. And so I encourage everyone to take part in this process should this be passed this evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Look, I speak in support of everything that the mover said. Just to reiterate, it is the beginning of a process, which is a long process and will include many opportunities for consultation with the community. There will be a submissions process. Those submissions will be tested by an independent panel. So we are listening to the community. We have proposed pretty much a modern zone, an activity centre zone, which modernises the system, takes a lot of other zones and implements them into a new activity centre zone, but doesn't change any of the policy parameters. So it doesn't really add anything, but it just modernises and simplifies the activity centre zone. It is worth considering, but as always with these things, they're a long process, and today we are just really starting that process, and we hope that the community will engage. We want to hear from those who are supportive of some of the measures, but we want to hear from those who also have concerns from some of the measures as well. There will be ample opportunities for us to make small changes if that's what's required after the consultation process, but certainly I urge all of my fellow councillors to begin this process, to go down this path, and not to delay this any further, because it's really unwarranted. We deferred at last meeting. I don't think another deferral is warranted again. We should start this process and start listening from our community about the future of the Brunswick Activity Centre and what it might look like. I echo the sentiments of the mover and hope this gets up.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Does any other councillor wish to speak to Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to speak, and in fact, I've got an alternative amendment. I've got mixed feelings about this proposal. There are many things I like in terms of more guaranteed commercial floor space, trying to make sure that the Brunswick Activity Centre is a vibrant place with many sorts of activities, including industrial activities and live music and all the rest of it. What I am worried about, and I think there could be some unintended consequences, is the expanding of the Brunswick Activity Centre zone to include properties in the Industrial 3 zone, which at the moment is a buffer between the noisy activities of the Brunswick Activity Centre zone and current Industrial 1 zone and residential areas. And I am aware that in Coldbrook Street, which is a street I'm familiar with, there wasn't, I know council has done consultation, there hasn't been a targeted letterbox drop, as far as I can tell, at least that's what the residents tell me, which means a lot of residents aren't really aware that the boundaries of the Brunswick Activity Centre zone are being proposed to be expanded to include their properties and what the implications of that is. And so I've got an alternative resolution, which is that council defers consideration of this amendment to July to allow consideration of the new activity centre zone to be confined to the current Brunswick Activity Centre boundaries in the Merri-bek planning scheme. And the reason for proposing it be deferred to July is because every big planning amendment like this is very complicated. There's a lot of attachments that the proposal refers to, and planners will have to do some work to make sure that in putting forward a proposal about not expanding the Brunswick Activity Centre zone, it'll need to do the work to make sure it references the correct documents, etc., so that everything holds together. So that's what I'm proposing, that council allow that to happen and therefore vote against this proposal that's on the table and vote for my alternative motion to to do the work to put forward a proposal where the Brunswick Activity Centre boundaries are not expanded.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. So I'll take that as a foreshadowed alternative if this one doesn't get up. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We might move on to, did the mover want a right of reply? No. Might move on to a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Riley, sorry, I'll do a division. Councillor Riley, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Ewers, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Panopoulos and Councillor Tapanos in favour. All those against? Councillor Hart, Councillor Bolton, Councillor Pavlidis. I declare that carried. Moving on to item 7.4, naming the park at 14 Frith Street in Brunswick. The voting poll results. Councillor Riley is on his feet.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I'm more than happy to move the officer recommendation. If I get a seconder, I'll speak to it.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. We've got two naming processes tonight, and I'm more than happy to move this. There's been a couple of hundred people input into this, and we've actually cut and diced it slightly different from the way we've done it in the past. So we've not just first past the post, because there were quite a number of choices, and the more choices you have in a first past the vote poll means that you spread the vote out, and so you may not be able to get sort of 50% plus. But we've also looked at it from the view of people's preferences this time, and in both processes, Yubbup Park's come up, and Yubbup is, in this case, is the Woiwurrung word for butterfly. Parakeet, get my explanations right. So I think given that this is an industrial park, it's kind of nice to see that we're kind of getting back to the original owners and occupiers of the space, the parakeets. And I think this is to be commended. We're in the process of reinstating the huge walls. I think it's on Bath Street or the other parallel street that comes off the street. It's been a very challenging site. It's an old industrial site from Fletcher Jones days, and we're going to open a new facility there in the corner, which has got the Art Deco heritage site, which has gone out to an expression of interest as well. So it's kind of going to be a very exciting new community space, and something we're delivering with our Park Coaster Home, which is incredibly important to a city which is taking thousands of more new residents every year, and accommodating more multi-unit developments so that we can have people walk in this case, within 300 metres of a park, but further out in the more spread out residential areas, it's 500 metres of an open space. So that work's been really important over the 2 terms of my being on council so far, and it's a legacy piece of work from earlier councils that mean we can really deliver what we need in the city in terms of quality of life. We know how important open space is. So I'm very happy to support this proposal to go with Yubbup Park, and then we'll go through the process of getting Geographic Names Victoria to formalise it, etc. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I'll just add, I'm happy to support this. I think Yubbup Park sounds great. This park, we're expecting to open before the end of the financial year. In part, we've had support for this park. So I think it's great that we're naming it at this meeting ahead of the opening next month. That's all I'll say. Do any other councillors wish to speak for or against Councillor Tapanos?
Thank you, Mayor. And in speaking, I have a foreshadowed motion which might be put on the screen for the benefit of councillors. And look, I welcome the process. I think this park is going to be fantastic, and I really look forward to its opening. It's a significant park that we've created in the city. I might get my financial figures wrong, but it's close to $17 or $18 million of a new industrial park. And for me, the consultation process I must say 200 people participating is a little bit lower than what I expected. And I do think that we need to constantly review the policy in regards to how we consult the community. We need to have a look at maybe workshopping suggestions from the community, making sure that we take into consideration historical and contextual issues around each specific site, and engaging more broadly than just an online poll, because we know that many members of our community don't use the internet and they're not engaged. I know that the Mayor mentioned that it's great to name it now so we can have a name at the opening, but that's not so important for me. I think that if we actually name it after the opening, after it's open to the community, it's a better engagement exercise. It enables us to be in the park with clipboards and say to users and families and children, what do you want this park to be named? That activity, that engagement is a lot more powerful, and we shouldn't be denying these users who may not even know that this park is happening, because it's probably people who are very in tune with council business that are online and naming things. But when it's open and when it's there and when people can use it, then people will start thinking about how they use it, what's important to them, and what name it should have. So I think that that is a very important element that's missing in the policy, and I wish that we could do it in this instance. So I'm suggesting this alternative to delay the naming of this park, and I'll be doing a similar alternative for the next naming report as well, so we can enable the users of the park to participate in an engagement process. For me, there's 180,000 people in the municipality. This is a $17 or $18 million new park. It's an industrial park with rich industrial history. We want to hear as many voices as possible, and I think 200 is not enough. And I think the way the consultation has occurred, and I'm not specifically speaking about this one, it's how it's happened in many other consultations, is not really that engaging, and we can do better. And I think that if we delay this only by a couple of months and do a better engagement, we'll get more participation, more buy-in from the community, and hear more voices, and that can only be good. Now, the end result might be exactly the same, but let's really tell the community about the park we're building and
Thank
give
you,
them that
Councillor
opportunity.
Tapanos. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this? Go ahead. Do you turn your mic on just so people can hear?
Is that an alternative motion?
It's foreshadowing an alternative.
Foreshadowing,
So if this was to fail,
Foreshadowing,
yeah,
lovely. Yep.
then Councillor Tapanos would put that up.
I will speak then.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Hart.
Yeah, I will speak in favour of the foreshadowed one, because I just think while I really recognise all the work that the officers have done, and really getting ahead of time, I can really appreciate those comments that Councillor Tapanos is making, and I think it's really some really good suggestions as the way forward with our whole naming processes. So while I would have been very happy to support it, I'm quite persuaded by his argument tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Pavlidis.
Thank you. I'm also going to echo Councillor Tapanos's comments here, and I'm happy to provide personal experience. Again, mine will apply, these points will apply for both naming reports tonight. Firstly, as Councillor Tapanos said, we do have over 180,000 people in our municipality, of which over 34% of our population are migrants and speak a language other than English, which I think the website said there's over 80 different languages spoken in our city. Now, to sort of personalise it a bit more, Friday evening I was in Brunswick, Orthodox Easter, so there were many Greek migrants there, and to say they were annoyed is putting it a bit mildly, because they weren't aware that this was out for consultation for naming. And the reason I say that is because they still live in the area, and many of them worked at Fletcher Jones, not just that site on Frith Street, but they had a second site on Ballarat Street. So, and that site's been there for decades. The comments I got is that we are never consulted. You just keep taking our money, we just pay our rates. We don't use computers. Obviously, they don't speak English and don't have email accounts. And to top it all off, I recall reading just recently in one of the reports of council, a consultation report, that that was done for council, that one of the preferred method of our residents to receive information from council was via mail. Not internet, not email, it was via mail. Now, in relation to the personal, which is why I'm sort of doubting the accuracy of the data or the raw data that we were supplied, I submitted, and I'm only going to use 4 examples, 4 emails on behalf of residents who don't speak English, who don't have emails and whatever, and that was a last minute thing because I happened to see them on the day, so I did it for them. When we got the raw data, I checked when I sent the email, because I also asked for it to be acknowledged, when it was acknowledged by officers, then I went to the raw data, did not correspond. So my question is how, if mine is missed, I'm questioning how many others were. And as Councillor Tapanos did say, only 200 odd were received, which is very, very poor considering we have a population of over 180,000. So obviously we're not doing enough to consult the municipality that we're supposed to be serving.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. Thank you, your time is now up. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We might move to the right of reply. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, look, thanks. Look, I think there's some good points being raised here, but I'm not sure that we should apply that to this naming process when we, right at this 11th hour. If councillors had those kind of concerns, we've been briefed on this more than once. I know that Councillor Tapanos has, because he's in the Brunswick activity group, that the councillors from that area get to hear about these things as well. So, we can there's always an argument for improving consultation, and I know there are certain councillors around the table who will always defer that and delay things because we need to go out and do more. But it really, while 180 or 200 may not sound like many, it's actually quite up there with the kind of responses we get on this level, on this kind of naming process. Now, that may not satisfy you, and yes, we could always do more and we could take more time, but at the end of the day, you need to make decisions, you need to come to some conclusion. I think I promoted it through my channels. I did my bit as a councillor. We all need to be out doing that and talking these things up. But meanwhile, there are many, many priorities on council and many other things that we're doing. And if you think that we need to be out there doing drop-ins and community stalls at the site and all those sort of things, well, fine, but you need to get on the front foot, councillors, and do it when the process has started, because if you're suggesting we go through a whole nother cost process to do this, that's extra cost on us on our budget and on the community as well. I just don't think it's a very good way to use it. But look, I have students at the school I work in who are learning Woiwurrung language regularly, and they would be delighted to know that we're using Yabbup as a Woiwurrung word for a new park to celebrate and to recognise not just the industrial history, but the pre-industrial history of our city. That's something I'm proud of and very happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. We'll move on to voting. All those in favour of this motion?
I have an amendment.
You have a proposed amendment to this one?
Yes, I do.
What's your amendment?
And we please, in the event that it
So it sounds like you want to foreshadow one, but
No, I just want to add something to this one in case you don't. Yep. Can I add a point 4, please?
Mayor, just a point of order. We just
Yeah,
closed
so we've
the-
just heard, because we had the right of reply, that marks the end of debate, which means that we do move on to the voting process. So in future, if you have a proposed amendment when you're speaking, you can foreshadow it, or you can raise your hand and move the amendment, seek to move the amendment, but we have closed off debate.
I do have a point of order too,
Yes, what's your point of order?
if I can. I would appreciate if comments that are made by councillors are factual when they respond to something. Because Councillor
Okay, I'll take that as a comment.
Time, and we didn't. We just got the raw data. So no, we didn't have actual time, plenty of time to.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. So we're on to voting for this motion. So all those in favour, Councillor Riley. Yep, there's 3. All those against? And any abstentions? Yeah, well, I declare that lost. So Councillor Tapanos had foreshadowed a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move it as was circulated and shortly to be on the screen.
Yeah, we'll just get governance loaded. All right, so do we have a seconder for Councillor Tapanos's alternative? Councillor Davidson to second? All right, Councillor Tapanos, would you like to speak to your...
Just briefly, because we've had a lot of debate already, but this really is about process, it's about more buy-in, and it's about getting that engagement in the community. And I think that the motion that I'm proposing here would enable council, and yes, it might cost a little bit more money, but it'll enable council to do a better engagement exercise.
Councillor Davidson, do you wish to speak as seconder?
Yes, just very briefly. Thank you, Councillor Tapanos, for bringing this forward. I think at whatever point it comes forward, these ideas are very worthwhile, and I think it will add a lot of value to the naming process that we have, and names are incredibly important, and this will allow a larger variety of people to have their say, and in a timely way that is relevant to the particular site.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Bolton to speak to this. So, yes, Councillor Hutt, just put your mic on when you ask.
Yeah, my point of, I just want to clarify about the timeframes. I'm trying to understand, is this process all going to be completed by August 24 in terms of the result of the poll, or is this the report comes back about the process? I'm just a bit...
So it says with the final outcome of the consultation. So I assume that means the final report.
And so part of that then is the review, the review is part of that with the
That's
naming.
separate. There's no deadline for that review.
Okay, that's what I was trying to
Yeah,
understand.
sure.
Because in order to do a different poll, you would actually be reviewing how you're going to do it, I would imagine. That's all.
Yes, but it's inviting further consultation. So I see what you're saying, but they both do work together. Do you have any amendments you'd like to suggest to that? Okay,
No.
cool.
I was just trying to get the
Yeah, no
timeframes
worries.
in my head.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Cheers.
Councillor Bolton, yeah.
Just briefly, I mean, I, would have been happy to have voted for the previous motion, but I actually do quite like Councillor Tapanos' idea of consulting people who use the park. Hopefully Yabba Park is what people choose, but also just in terms of the numbers of people who vote, I mean, not everyone wants to be involved in every decision around the city or wants to be involved in working out park names or this or that, or sometimes some things people don't realise things are going to affect them, and that's probably a more serious issue. But I do kind of like the idea of involving the people using a park to have a say in what the name of it is. So that's why I sort of voted or abstained on the previous motion, and I'm going to support this one. Yep.
Councillor Bolton. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this? Councillor Pavlidis.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I do have, so we've got 2 points on here. A third point, an amendment if you would like to consider. which I haven't circulated, I just thought of it, irrespective of what the outcome would be, to have a plaque erected with the history of the site.
So that might already be in the works with the park design. So we might just take that as a question to the Director of City Infrastructure. Just before, we might not need an amendment, so yes.
Yeah.
Go
Thanks,
ahead.
Mayor. So there are going to be 4 historic interpretive panels in the park, and 3 of those will relate to the history of the park as a steel foundry, and the 4th one will relate to its time as Fletcher Jones. So that will be incorporated into the park.
Okay, so Councillor Pavlidis.
Yeah, just something further to add as well. I would like also, when this goes out to further consultation, if we could also make it clear as to who is able to vote. I got questions asked as to, well, I don't live in the area anymore, so I can't vote. And I just found out through the director who responded today that it was open to anybody. So I think a lot of residents thinking, well, I used to live here, I no longer live here, so I can't vote, which wasn't the case. So if we can make it clear as to who can vote, please.
Yeah, I'm sure that officers are taking note of that, and that can be considered in the review if this motion passes. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? Don't believe we had anyone speak against, so there's no right of reply. So we'll move on to voting for this. All those in favour? Can declare that carried unanimously. Great, we'll move on to the next item.
Mr Mayor, can I propose a similar resolution for the next item as well, which will also appear shortly on the screen?
Okay. We had Councillor Riley on his feet, but happy. Okay, so Councillor Tapanos is seeking to move an alternative, so we'll get it up on the screen, and then we'll see if you have a seconder.
Second.
So yes, sorry, Councillor, I saw a couple of people wanting to second, but Councillor Davidson's happy to second that. So sorry, we'll just make sure it is on the screen.
Thank you, councillors. Look, I'm going to be very quick because I'm running out of battery. Look, same arguments as last time. The urgency on this one is even less because the opening will be a lot later. But also, we're going to be undertaking a process shortly around users that are going to come into this space, artists who are going to have their spaces here at this new facility. So I think consulting them would also improve the process here in this case as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Davidson?
No, nothing further to add, just reiterating the points from the last motion.
Great. I think we might have lost Councillor Tapanos. So any other councillors wish to contribute to debate on this item? We'll move on to voting. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously.
I can't see chamber, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, thanks for letting us know. Oh
Is
yeah,
there?
yeah, Councillor Tapanos appeared, and yes, we can. Okay, so let's just do that vote. All those in favour? Yeah, and I can declare that carried unanimously. Can you see the chamber, Councillor Pavlidis? Yeah, great. Great. Now we may not see Councillor Tapanos for the rest of the meeting, given battery situation, but we're on to item 7.6, the updated Merri-bek art collection policy. Do I have a councillor wishing to move a motion? Councillor Pavlidis?
Yeah, I'm happy to move off to the recommendation.
Great. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Pavlidis?
I'll just take it as read. Nothing to add. Just thank you to all the officers for their hard work. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pavlidis. Councillor Panopoulos?
I'll also take that as read.
Great. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to voting. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Item 7.7, support for street parties and road closures. Councillor Riley seeking to move.
Yeah, if I get a second, I'm happy to
happy to
support
second.
the Officer Rec. Look, I'm really doing this on behalf of Councillor Conlon, who's unfortunately an apology tonight, and sort of initiated this report coming back out of notice of motion. We do various ways. We have various processes in closing down and opening streets up for play streets, which is kind of an easy and cheap way of closing your street and letting kids use it. This is all about going back to the open space policy comments I made earlier and creating more space, because the biggest open space in our city is roads, and they are some of the most detrimental. They kill us, they injure us all the time because of the behaviour of drivers, but they also heat up our city to extraordinary capacity. But by having play streets, it's a way of kind of repurposing them. We also encourage communities to have parties and so on, and this is sort of dealing with the traffic management issues and the costs and other things. So what we're trying to do in this is make things little less red tape, putting aside some finances to help with those groups that want to do it and explore this. So I think it's a good piece of work and commend the officers on it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. As seconder, I don't have anything further to add. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this? Yeah, Councillor Bolton.
Just to say that I very much agree with us doing this sort of review and then taking some short-term measures to make it easier for these sort of street parties. I know that when people were organising the street party at Duckett Street, you know, people were happy to raise money from the local residents for some of the permits, but then they got hit with some, you know, really big permit charges. And I guess because council has to relate to a wide range of organisations, from little tiny street groups to big mega festivals, and sometimes, so often our laws and permit systems are really designed for really big crowds that, you know, with big extravaganza kind of festivals, rather than the little tiny festivals where, you know, people have just, you know, that are really low risk and where people just band together to raise money. And also we have a proposal for next year from the Brunswick Mosque for a street iftar dinner as part of Ramadan next year, and so they've sort of contacted the council early about that. Yeah, I fully support this work of making it easier for all sorts of, especially the little neighbourhood groups and so forth, to be able to do things like this.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this? We'll move on to voting. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. Moving on to item 7.8, Year 3 Council Action Plan 23-24 Third Quarter Performance Report. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Any councillor? Councillor Davidson? Yeah, Councillor Davidson to move, Councillor Yildiz to second. Councillor Davidson?
No, just to take it as read.
Yeah. Councillor Yildiz, nothing further to add. Any other councillors wish to speak to this? All right, we'll vote on it. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. Item 7.9, it's the Stewart Street Streetscape Improvement Project, the contract. Councillor Riley, you have your hand up.
Mayor, I want to move the officer recommendation. I'm just checking, sorry, my notes.
I think there were some tweaks.
Yeah. I want to remove the officer recommendation, but we're going to we're substituting or deleting points B and C and replacing it with a new item B, which says refers the budget to the shortfall of 878,082 to the 24-25 budget process as part of the reallocation and planned reprioritisation of the activity centre capital budgets over forward years with no net dollar impact on the 24-25 capital works program. Thanks. If I get a seconder, I'm happy to speak.
Yeah, so that's what you're seeking to move. So I believe that was the alternative circulated by officers. Yeah. So yeah, I think the could you just scroll down slightly? Yeah, there we go. So it's point to the bolded bit. There's the change. So is there a seconder for Councillor Riley? Councillor Bolton, happy to second. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Look, this is a really good piece of work that we're about to do. It's been quite complex. It's taken a lot of engagement and consultation, and I know some councillors still have a bit of reservation about the outcomes, but essentially this is trying to deal with the lack of a footpath on the south side right up against Nicholson Street, where it goes into the bend, which has been a highly dangerous and problematic, and Councillor Carly Hannon was the mayor at the time when we had quite a lot of issues there, and followed up a lot of the advocacy around that, and I believe there's some improvements about to happen on Albion Street, not the main part, but the part that goes to the west of the squiggly part of the road where the danger is, which is good to see. That'll be a new improved pedestrian crossing. But this part of the road is opposite Brunswick East Primary School, and it's a highly used part of the road, but it's also complicated by the rat running that goes off Nicholson Street down onto Blythe Street, or vice versa. It has a local bus, and it has many buses that drop kids for excursions going to Ceres. So it's a pretty important piece of road that turns at a right angle. So it's very challenging to try and address all of those issues in one piece of work, but this is our first attempt. And the Brotherhood that own the land on the south side of the road, we've actually managed to acquire some of that land to put a disability accessible path there, which will be a really much needed improvement. And the Brotherhood have also, I'm just trying to remember the name of the Brotherhood, but the full name, the Cretan Brotherhood. So they come from the Isle of Crete. They are, thanks Phil, they are looking to improve the tree plantings on their side of the boundary, which will be moving further south. So we will lose a bit of greenery, but really the quality of the trees are there are pretty sad, and we'll get better trees and better shade and better canopy so that people like former Mayor Natalie Abood can celebrate that urban forests aren't dying. And in the process, we're going to get improved pedestrian crossings, better routes into and out of Ceres, which is their main gate. And there's a whole lot of other things in this package, but I just want to commend the officers for a really extensive and long piece of work. I want to commend many in the community, not only Ceres, but other advocates who've been arguing around Stewart Street, which is the part we're looking to now go in and do the works on. So while we won't resolve everything, we will make significant improvements, and then we can come back in time to see what else we can do in years to come, because I'm sure it won't be going away, but it'll be a great new addition to getting into Ceres for people, and hopefully we can address the rat rate running to boot. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Bolton, a seconder. Great. Any other councillors wish to speak to this? Okay, so we'll move on to voting. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. Move on to the next item, item 7.10, contract award, provision of heating, ventilation and air conditioning maintenance, controls, upgrades and air quality services. Councillors, do I have someone wishing to move a motion? Councillor Hart to move. I'm happy to second. Councillor Hart to speak. Take it as read. Yep. The same. So it's I'll just speak briefly and saying it's making official contract for those heating, ventilation, air conditioning services. But that's all I'll say. Any other councillors wish to speak to it? It's a big contract. Yes. We'll move on to voting. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. Item 7.11, another contract. It's for mobile garage mobile garbage bin supply, delivery and field maintenance. Do I have a councillor seeking to move the motion? Councillor Bolton? And a seconder? Councillor Hart? Councillor Bolton?
Take it as read.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton and Councillor Hart. The same. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, look, I just want to really speak briefly. This is an even bigger contract, but it's actually coming at the end of a very long process to change our bin system. And this is sort of getting to the realms of $7 million contract over quite a number of years. But it's a really important piece of work. It's been very complex, and we've still got to get through to the last stages of looking at fortnightly garbage trial rollout. So this is significant, and it's really a credit to our officers and our engagement team, our comms team and everyone else in getting to this point. So I'm really looking forward to it, but also hoping that people will actually think a bit more about what they throw in their bins, because we've got a big problem with a lot of non-compliance and people putting the wrong thing in the wrong bin. So just a shout out to those who are tuned in and listening to please be a bit more careful, but also to note that you should be able to close your lid on the bin. If you don't, the driver is unlikely to pick it up. So if you overload it, that means birds and things can get in and other animals. We try not to overload it. You need to be closing your lids, please, just to do the right thing, and we'll all be a little bit happy. But this is a really big contract, and thanks to the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Do any other councillors wish to speak? Move on to voting. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. On to item 7.12, the Financial Management Report for the period ended 31st of March 2024. Councillors, do I have a motion? I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bolton to second. So I'll speak to it as mover. This is, as written on the box, the Financial Management Report for the period ended the 31st of March. Its detailed financial review is undertaken at the end of February, and the results are presented in this report as the full year revised forecast. So any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Although we'll move on to voting. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. Item 7.13, the Governance Report, May 2024 Cyclical Report. Do I have a motion, councillors? So Councillor Bolton to move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Davidson, Councillor Bolton.
And I'll also take it as read.
Great. Councillor Davidson? No, nothing further to add. I'll just speak to it briefly and just say it standard item on our council.
Should probably just declare a perceived conflict of interest.
Yes,
I'll just leave because there's an item there covering attendance at a conference. Thanks.
Great. Okay, so Councillor Riley has a conflict of interest because it's voting on whether he'll attend a conference, so he's excused himself. But this is a report that comes up in every agenda. It has a number of different things, including minutes from advisory committee meetings, records of meetings, responses to public question time questions taken on notice, as well as approving the attendance at conferences and other things. This one also revokes the right-of-way associated policies from 2011. And notes the, notes the responses to question time. So that's all I'll say. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this? So we'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? Yeah, I can declare that carried unanimously. And we can invite Councillor Riley back in. So we're on to the notices of motion now. So item 8.1, celebration of International Mother Language Day. Councillor Bolton.
So this is me.
So we'll just see if you've got a seconder. Yeah, Councillor Panopoulos, happy to second. Sorry, Councillor Horton, go ahead.
So this is a motion about a celebration of International Mother Language Day, and probably I wouldn't have thought about this if I hadn't received an approach from the Bangladeshi community in Fawkner, which is a growing community within Fawkner, and the Melbourne Bangla School, like other language schools, meets every Saturday or Sunday for children of migrants or children who want to learn their mother language. They've been holding an annual International Mother Language Day celebration, which I've been attending, or I've attended most of those days. And I believe that International Mother Language Day is celebrated in a number of councils in Sydney, particularly in Western Sydney, and also Wyndham, and I think another council in the southeastern suburbs somewhere, but I'm not sure which one. And this is an important day, like we heard from the Bangladeshi comrades Anam and Rafi earlier. It's a particularly important day for them because, you know, their language was declared illegal when they were considered part of Pakistan, and they had a big campaign to win the right to speak that language. And so they have a public holiday on International Mother Language Day, and the UN actually endorsed it as an actual official UN day. But the day actually, while it might not be widely celebrated in Australia, it is of significance really for all of our languages in Australia. Aboriginal languages were banned until the 1970s. People were punished for speaking their languages, which resulted in the number of Aboriginal languages dropping from 800 to 140, or approximately, and not all of those are strongly spoken. So it's a day which has got relevance to a lot of different cultures in Australia who may have had their language suppressed in their home country, or in the case of First Nations in Australia during colonisation and the extended colonisation period. But also there's another element of it, which is that grandchildren need to have the ability to communicate with their grandparents. And so often the kids of migrants in Australia, they're growing up in an English-speaking world, forget their mother language, but then it's hard for them to communicate with their grandparents and cousins and so forth when they do see their families. So this is a proposal. I know we can't, I'm proposing that we celebrate International Mother Language Day in Merri-bek, but also we have some discussion with the Bangladeshi and other communities about some sort of memorial monument, some sort of physical structure along the lines of what Wyndham Council has, and it's well established in Wyndham. So I'd like to see us do that as well.
And seconder, Councillor Panopoulos.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to the residents and the community members who came in to speak to us on this item, and thank you to Councillor Bolton for submitting this notice of motion. I'll be very brief on this, but really just to echo the sentiments around how important this is, especially for, I guess, those second and third generations in the diasporas across Australia. Many of us were sent or voluntarily went to Saturday school, Greek school, or any other languages as children, and it's something that I think we didn't appreciate when we were growing up. But we do certainly appreciate it now, how important it is being able to speak to your grandparents and have that real connection with your culture and the history of, I guess, what brought, in my case, my grandparents to this country, and even within Greece and that part of the world, the migration that happened there. So this is really important in making sure that we can connect with our own culture and heritage and language. And it also, I think really importantly, dot point 2 brings in meeting with representatives of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung traditional owners and the local Bangladeshi community, because it is true that, in the genocide that happened in this country when it was first colonised, language wasn't allowed to be permitted, and that's one of the consistent things that we see in genocides across the world throughout history. And so people being able to connect to that and to speak their languages is incredibly important. And if this is just one thing that we can do to I guess, work towards undoing what's happened in the past in this country, I think this is a really good step forward. So thanks, Councillor Bolton, for putting in this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Davidson.
Can I suggest an amendment as well? I understand the significance of point number 2, and I don't want to diminish from it by adding in other culturally diverse groups that are in Merri-bek. It may be another point number 3, but I think it would be a good opportunity to incorporate speaking with different communities from various nationalities and backgrounds that do reside in Merri-bek, so that they can participate in this celebration as well. I was under the impression that point number 2 was quite poignant to the genocide, or if you're happy to put... Yeah. And other culturally diverse groups within Merri-bek, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Add that in before
Yeah, and just to speak to that briefly, thank you for accepting that, Councillor Bolton, if that's okay.
I think it might make sense to put it in, so Councillor Bolton was saying before on proposals for, is that right?
Yeah, Multicultural Advisory Committee and other culturally diverse
groups
in Merri-bek.
Yes, yeah. And just to speak to the intention of that, I think a lot of us come from or have parents or grandparents who come from different parts of the world. My mum is from Sicily, and I know there's a lot of discussion about the dialects within Italy and how a dialect represents a part of history and an important part of culture, and it tells a story about those people and where they've come from. And a lot of the time in Italy, only pure Italian is taught, but dialects are also very important connecting points as well. So it's for those reasons that I would like that included. And of course, we have many people from wonderful countries all around the world that reside here.
You were fine with that? Great. So that's become part of the substantive, and you've spoken to that. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? Yeah, Councillor Hart?
Yeah, just briefly, I just think how wonderful it was, and just to acknowledge, to see the Bangladeshi community coming, obviously approaching Councillor Bolton for the motion, but coming to the meeting, and I just think how much that enriches council. But I also want to make the point of how how that's reflected in so many other things we do, and I'm really mindful of Councillor Pavlidis' contributions at every opportunity around ensuring that we open up engagement to all of our diverse multicultural communities, and I really commend her for that, because that's really putting into action some of the principles that we're talking about. But I just think it was, so welcoming tonight to see communities that I don't know and haven't interacted with in coming to council. It's just wonderful.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. I think we'll need to vote for an extension of time. So, so Councillor Riley to move, Councillor Davidson to second. All those in favour extending by 30 minutes the meeting time? Yeah, I declare that carried. Councillor Pavlidis, you've got your hand up.
I'll just be very brief, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hart, for the kind words. Also, thank you to Councillor Bolton and to Councillor Davidson for bringing this to council. It's a great idea, and I really can't think of a better way to celebrate our multicultural community than celebrating them all on a one particular day where we're all celebrated together. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pavlidis. Any other councillors wish to speak to this? We might move on to Voting, all those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. We're now on to our final notice of motion for this evening, 8.2, installation of defibrillators in public areas.
Yeah.
Over to you, Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. And Councillor Bolton just offered to second.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor Bolton to second. Yeah, go, Councillor Davidson.
So we currently have defibrillators within many council-owned buildings, including sporting pavilions and community halls and libraries. This motion seeks to expand the use, the availability of defibrillators by liaising with various shopping strips, so in our activity centres or neighbourhood activity centres, to speak to store owners or supermarkets and inquire whether or not they would be agreeable to having a defibrillator there. We know that it does make a huge difference when it comes to cardiac arrests, and every second counts when someone is experiencing that. So along with that comes the request to provide training and first aid for members of the community. So what I'm seeking is a report to come back in relation to expanding on this, and also proposing opportunities for perhaps council-run courses on first aid and the use of defibrillators within our activity centres and neighbourhood activity centres as well.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Bolton.
I think this is a really great idea, and you know, thinking about where might be good places to locate defibrillators, because there are, you know, sometimes in a busy shopping strip, you know, where are people likely to go to seek assistance if someone suddenly collapses, and therefore locating the defibrillators there. And certainly large organisations are likely to have someone with first aid training on site or an OH&S officer. So, but also like sporting clubs, you know, might not necessarily have, all of them have first aiders on site, I'm not sure, but certainly that would be, you know, sporting clubs would be interested in injuries, so that would be a likelihood. I mean, there's certainly been some young people who have died of heart attacks while playing football in regional Victoria and other places. So I think this is a great idea, and it is one of those medical emergencies where if defibrillators are available and if people have CPR training, it makes a really massive difference. Even if people are a little bit rusty on their CPR training, it makes a massive difference.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? We'll move on to voting. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. Move on to item 9 on the agenda. So that's the end of our notices of motion. Move on to item 9, which is notices of rescission. Councillor says we have none. I'll move on to foreshadowed items. Councillors, so it's Councillor Pavlidis.
Sorry, thank you. And through you, Mayor, foreshadowing review. Now, remember Councillor Tappanoff saying a review, but I think it was to do with the naming policy. So I'm proposing a review of communication and consultation engagement policy, number 1. And number 2, I'm also foreshadowing a customer service report as well, coming to council on a regular basis.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. Do any other councillors wish to foreshadow something that may be the subject of a notice of motion for the next council meeting? No? Okay. So on to item 11, urgent business, which again, we have none. We do have a confidential item on the agenda. So I now need to we now need to move to close the meeting to the public. So Councillor Riley to move that we close the meeting to the public, Councillor Davison to second. All those in favour? I declare that carried. No, you were waving. Yeah, that's okay. So I'd like to thank those members of the gallery who were just leaving, as well as those who were watching or live streaming at home for your interest in council matters. I wish you all a good night. I now declare this meeting closed to the public at 10:11.